Hey guys, it's Mike here, and over the course of my time on YouTube, I have discussed some of the biggest what-if scenarios in the history of the Dragon Ball franchise. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down and going in-depth in a deep dive in all the biggest and greatest what-if scenarios of the Cell Saga. But before I begin, if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing and enabling all notifications. That way you can stay up to date with all my future videos. Make sure to leave a like, share this video out, share your own thoughts down below in the description, and with that being said, let's get into the video. Hey guys, Mike here, and today I'm bringing you another segment on Dragon Ball Z. The topic of this video will be one that I've been wondering about for a while now, and that is, what if a Cell Jr. survived? Now, as we all know, the Cell Juniors were spawned by Cell during his fight against Gohan in order to attack his friends in an effort to bring out his hidden powers. Due to their surprising strength, they gave all of the Z fighters a great fight, beating most of them into submission, including a weakened Goku. Eventually, Gohan did go Super Saiyan 2 and destroyed all of them with ease. But what if one of them survived the onslaught by Gohan? How would this impact the story after the Cell games, including the fights to come? Well, let's take a detailed look at this and find out. Now let's assume for the sake of argument that the Cell Jr. didn't immediately try and go back after the Z fighters, considering the fact that Gohan could easily kill it, as it killed the rest of its brothers. The most similar path that I could see this following would be that of Piccolo Jr. in Dragon Ball. Before the death of King Piccolo at the hands of Goku, he spit out an egg who became his final son and reincarnation in Piccolo Jr. Piccolo Jr. existed for the sole purpose of getting revenge on Goku, and as a result he trained constantly for that purpose. In as little as 3 years of training, Piccolo matured to the same age as Goku, and became his essential equal in power. Considering how fast Cell matured from his larval state, as well as the fact that he possesses Piccolo's genes, it's highly possible that the Cell Jr. can also age at this rapid rate. And imagine if the Cell Jr., being aware of how powerful Gohan and the rest of the Z fighters were, as well as the fact that they would train to get even stronger, trained itself. Not only is it already starting off with a very high level of power that it was born with, but it also possesses Namekian and Saiyan genes, two races known for having massive gains in power through training. Just imagine the gains that a Cell Jr. can make being made up of the genes of the most powerful beings in the universe, and having a greater starting strength than its father did when it was created. It's very likely that in a matter of years, not only would it surpass its father, but also Super Saiyan 2 Teen Gohan. After all, it would know firsthand just how powerful Gohan was when it fought him, so it would have a realistic goal to be able to surpass. Although on top of this, possessing the genes of Vegeta and Goku, it probably wouldn't even stop there, but continue to push its power till its absolute limit. Many people have often wondered what would happen if we had a Cell that trained. Well, in this case, that's exactly what it appears to be. So what would happen if a character with the potential to be this strong was inserted into the Dragon Ball Z timeline? Well, I happen to think that it would bring on drastic changes. For this, there's two different scenarios that I can picture where the Cell Jr. would actually insert himself into the picture. The first scenario would take place in between the gap between the Cell games and the beginning of the Buu Saga. There's no reason to suspect that the Cell Jr. would wait the full 7 years to show up at a period of time either during or after the Buu Saga, simply because the story makes the skip itself. So if we assume the same number of years that it took Piccolo to mature is the same amount that it would take for Cell Jr. to mature, say 3 or 4 years, and he showed up at that point, what exactly would happen? Well, there's an argument to be made that this is actually the worst case scenario. The reason I say this is because Goku is no longer around and Gohan is no longer training. The only character that we actually know was training in this period of time was Vegeta. However, the Cell Jr. was actually on the same level as Vegeta, if not a little bit stronger, when they actually fought during the Cell games. And considering that it probably took around 7 years for Vegeta to actually achieve Super Saiyan 2 and to surpass Gohan, and the Cell Jr. probably has a much greater potential than Vegeta considering that it not only has Saiyan genes, but the Namekian genes, it's very likely that the Cell Jr. would also surpass him. So we have a Cell Jr. who's trained for the past 4 years, walking into the spot in the timeline. where it's very likely that no one is on its level, considering that the strongest character at the time, Gohan, has not been training and has been getting weaker for the past 4 years. And considering that Goku is also dead during this period of time, he also won't be around to help fight the Cell Jr. So in this case, we're presented with what is most likely a no-win scenario for Gohan and the Z Fighters. And the only way I could see them surviving would be if Goku used his one-day visit to come back and help fight him. And even then, there's a number of things that we don't know, such as if Goku at this point in time has already mastered the Super Saiyan 2 and 3 transformation, and also if Goku has learned the fusion technique yet. Considering how Goku in his Super Saiyan 2 form wasn't that much more powerful than Gohan when he fought Cell, it's very unlikely that he'd already mastered the Super Saiyan 3 transformation by this point in time. However, it is possible that Goku learned the fusion technique at this point in time, which could help them to become stronger than Cell Jr. and ultimately defeat him. Of course, all this assumes that the Cell Jr. would actually allow them to buy time in order to learn this technique or for Goku to return. However, considering that a Cell Jr. is an asexual reproduction, a sensual clone of Cell, and assuming that they have the same mental capabilities, it is entirely possible that this would happen, considering the fact that with Vegeta's genes, Cell is very eager to fight somebody with a greater power than his own, as we saw in the fight against Gohan. So perhaps upon defeating the Z Fighters and learning about Goku's fusion technique, the Cell Jr. would allow them time to learn it just so it can combat them. Going by just how powerful Gotenks became, if this were to transpire, it's very likely that they would be able to attain the power necessary to defeat the Cell Jr. And considering that Goku and Gohan had both fought Cell in the past, it's very unlikely that they would allow him to get in another situation where he could possibly blow up the Earth and take it with him. So assuming that the Cell Jr. would allow all of these things to transpire, in this scenario they would actually be able to overcome him. The only other scenario in which I could see this taking place would have to be during the Buu Saga, and here this scenario becomes a little bit more up in the air. The reason I believe that this would have to take place now is due to a number of factors. The first factor would have to be the return of Goku. As Gohan quit training and with Vegeta always behind him in the past, Goku returning makes him the de facto most powerful fighter in the world. On top of this, Goku's death came at the hands of Cell, Cell Jr.'s father, so the combination of these different factors could very possibly force the Cell Jr.'s hand into going ahead with his plot for revenge. But even in this case, there's the possibility that the Cell Jr. may not know that Goku has returned to the Earth. So the next factor would have to be the tournament. A gathering of the most powerful fighters in the universe would certainly have to draw the attention of the Cell Jr., just as it did the Supreme Kai. And even if all of the Z Fighters were able to successfully suppress their power to the point where the Cell Jr. could not sense them, it is still likely that he would keep tabs on the tournament just in case they showed up, and it would certainly be tipped off immediately once they start fighting, especially in the fight between Goku and Vegeta. The last and perhaps biggest factor out of all of them would have to be Buu himself. The resurrection and release of Majin Buu was a big event, and his energy was so large that it could be felt all the way around the world, and even made Goku and Vegeta give pause during their fight in Super Saiyan 2. So even if the Cell Jr. was unable to sense everything that happened up until that point, it's a certainty that he would have been able to feel Buu when he was released. And since we've already established that with Vegeta's cells, the Cell Jr. would probably be very interested in fighting someone with a power either on its own level or even higher, it's very likely that Majin Buu's resurrection and release would be the final straw that would draw him out of hiding. Everything that happens after this point is determined by how much stronger the Cell Jr. has gotten in its 7 years of training. As far as I'm concerned, if the Cell Jr. can surpass Super Perfect Cell in 3 to 4 years of training, it can probably at least double that strength within 3 to 4 more. This would place the Cell Jr. either on or above Buu's level, because if we remember, the stolen energy from Gohan at the tournament was enough to fill up Buu's power level to nearly half capacity. This would probably place Buu's power at 2 times Super Saiyan 2 Teen Gohan's from the Cell games. Deciding the winner in a fight between two opponents who are of the same power is very tricky, but in the end I would have to give it to Cell just because of the sheer number of his different techniques. Although it's likely that Buu's regeneration is even better than Cell's, Cell just knows so many different techniques which he gained from all of the different Z fighters that it's very likely that he would come out victorious in the end. And let's also not forget that the Cell Jr. being a copy of Cell would know all of his techniques, including the Spirit Bomb, which is what killed Buu in the original timeline. And unlike Vegeta, if the Cell Jr. blows himself up to try and kill Buu, he'll actually regenerate and come back even stronger. At this point, if Buu has been killed and Cell Jr. still remains, it's likely he'll replace Buu as the primary antagonist. However, in this case, unlike the previous scenario, Goku is on Earth and is a Super Saiyan 3. And as we know, a Super Saiyan 3 is 4 times as strong as a Super Saiyan 2, which would make Goku at least twice as strong as the Cell Jr. So unless Cell Jr. got 8 times stronger in his 7 years of training, it's probable to say that if Goku goes full force, he would overcome and defeat him. But if Goku decides not to do this just as he did with Buu, it's still likely that everything else that came into play in the last scenario would happen here as well. Goku would probably take advantage of Cell's overconfidence and willingness to fight a stronger opponent and use that to give Goten and Trunks the time in order to teach them the fusion technique. And considering that Cell could not transform into any more powerful states such as Buu did with Super Buu or absorbing the other Z fighters, this would give him no answer to the fusion technique, which would likely result in his inevitable defeat. So in the end, in this scenario, this would actually make Cell Jr. an even lesser threat than Buu was. As a result, the rest of the Z fighters would likely not be killed and the Earth would probably not be destroyed. So there you have it. I believe I answered the question of what would happen if a Cell Jr. survived. In the end, I believe that his own overconfidence and hubris would probably lead to his inevitable downfall, just as it did his own father. Well, my name is Mike, and this has been another segment on Dragon Ball Z. Let me know your own thoughts in the comments section, and what topics you would like me to talk about in the future. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And as I always say, stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future. Hey guys, it's Mike here, and welcome to another segment on Dragon Ball Z. Today we're going to talk about a very interesting topic that was recommended by a subscriber. That is, what if future Gohan went Super Saiyan 2? Now, as we all know, future Gohan is an alternate version of Gohan which exists in the history of Trunks' timeline, where the androids have taken over the world, destroyed most of human civilization, and killed the rest of the Z fighters. After the deaths of his friends and family, Gohan took it upon himself to train Trunks, the sole surviving son of Vegeta and perhaps the last best hope of humanity. Throughout the years, they encountered the androids on several occasions, and during one occasion, Gohan actually lost his arm. Eventually, Gohan decided enough was enough, and after taking Trunks out of the equation, went to go fight the androids on his own. However, due to their vastly superior strength, Gohan was defeated and killed at their hands. With his master and best friend dead, and no one to help Trunks in his effort against the androids, Trunks had the incentive to go back in time to another timeline to help their future and perhaps find a way to help his own. But what if Gohan went Super Saiyan 2 against the androids, much like he did against Cell in their fight? How would this affect the story and the events therein? Well, let's take a more detailed look at this and find out. Now, of course, there's 2 big factors to consider when factoring in this scenario. The first one would definitely have to be how powerful was future Gohan, and the second one would have to be how powerful were the androids in Trunks' timeline. Now, in the case of Gohan, it's always been a little bit peculiar how powerful he actually was during the history of Trunks' storyline. The reason for this is due to the fact that even though Gohan was in his 20s by the time of his death, he was vastly inferior compared to himself as a child in the main timeline. Not only this, but it was implied that Gohan is actually weaker than Goku was when he returned from Yardrat. So this would mean that despite 14 years of training to get back against the androids, Gohan was still weaker than his father before the 3 years of training in the main timeline. And while this is perhaps a plot hole or a sake of plot convenience, there is a possible other explanation. Not knowing that the androids were coming, it's unlikely that Gohan would have trained up until the point that his father died. So this would mean that he wouldn't have trained with Goku or Piccolo during those 3 years of preparation. So Gohan would have been much weaker during this point in the timeline. And with all of the other Z fighters killed by the androids, Gohan wouldn't have anyone to train with and thus would have to train on his own for years. And considering that Bulma's lab was destroyed along with all of her equipment, it's unlikely that he would have been able to train in higher gravity. Not to mention that with Goku, Piccolo, and Kami dead, anyone who knew about the Hyperball Time Chamber is now gone, thus Gohan wouldn't have been able to use it either for training. So considering all these different factors, it might actually make sense that he was weaker than his father. Now, when talking about the powers of the androids, it's important to note that the manga and the anime portrayed them very differently. Whereas in the anime, Gohan is made to look like he can fight on equal ground against not only one but both of the androids. In the manga, this is very different. as when Gohan shows up to fight the androids, it's implied that the last time where he lost his arm, he only fought 17. Not only that, but even though Gohan says that he's been training a lot and thinks he's powerful enough to take on not only 17 but 18, 17 reveals that he actually used less than 50% of his power in their last encounter. Gohan is shocked by this revelation, and as 17 attacks, it's clear by Gohan's face that he knows he's going to die. There's nothing he can do to stop it. And of course this is actually what happens, considering the next time we see him he's dead on the ground. So this alone should tell us that 17 is at least twice as powerful as Gohan was, and 18 shouldn't be too far behind him. As a result of this, it becomes much easier to pinpoint exactly what would happen if future Gohan went Super Saiyan 2. The reason for this is because the Daizenshuu multipliers list the multiplication of Super Saiyan 2 as 2 times Super Saiyan. In other words, if Gohan were to go Super Saiyan 2, then his power would only become twice what it was as a Super Saiyan. And the problem with that is that we've already demonstrated that 17 was more powerful than Gohan when using less than 50% of his maximum power. So the problem with this is that even if Gohan went Super Saiyan 2, he would still be no match for 17, especially not if both androids teamed up against him. So in the end, even despite his further transformation, Gohan would still be defeated and killed just as he was in the original timeline. So there you have it. I believe I've demonstrated exactly what would happen if Gohan went Super Saiyan 2. In the end, the powers of the androids simply proved too great, and Gohan's powers simply would never be enough. Well, my name is Mike, and this has been another segment on Dragon Ball Z. Tell me your own thoughts in the comments section, what you thought of this video, and what other topics you would like me to talk about in the future. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And as I always say, stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future. In Dragon Ball Z, the villain Cell was one of the most powerful and difficult opponents that Goku and his friends had ever come across. Not only was his power overwhelming, but on top of that, he also possessed the abilities and techniques of the Z fighters. However, eventually Cell went on to be defeated by Goku's son Gohan after he unlocked his Super Saiyan 2 transformation. But one question fans have wondered ever since this arc came to its conclusion is, why didn't Cell make use of one of Goku's greatest techniques? And what if Cell used the Kaioken? What kind of a difference would he have made? Well, in this video, we're gonna break that down. Alright guys, so we're going to be addressing that question of what if Cell used the Kaioken in Dragon Ball Z, and we're also going to be discussing why in fact he chose not to use it during the main storyline. So to join me is someone you've seen on my videos in the past who is also really a Cell expert, I would say, and his name is...
Hey guys, what's up? It's Josh from Dragon Ball Nation here, and you know, I gotta be on a video talking about Cell. You can't not have me here.
Yeah, it's an unwritten rule. Just has to happen. But, you know, this has been a really big question, as I've said, since really Dragon Ball Z came to its conclusion, especially during that saga, and many fans have wondered, why didn't Cell use what could have perhaps been his biggest trump card in the Kaioken? Because, really, if Cell was overpowered and he possessed that move, you know, why couldn't he have just amped up his power to where he suddenly has the edge once again? And it really is an interesting question, but Josh, what do you think about this? First off, I guess, do you think Cell had the actual ability to use the Kaioken? And second, if he did, why do you think he didn't use it?
Well, it's kind of a very similar question to, like, if Cell could use a Spirit Bomb, because in the manga he says, I can do moves from the Kamehameha all the way to the Spirit Bomb, and, you know, we were just looking at Kai again, and the English dub for Kai, he says, you know, he can use the Kaioken, which is only in the English dub, so, you know, it's not in the original material, but, you know, I answered this question myself with the Spirit Bomb in a separate video. Yeah. But with Kaioken, it's weird because if he can do the Spirit Bomb, or at least say he can do it, you know, he's confident, at least in his own ability to do it. In the manga, you know, it kind of varies. He says, I may even be able to do the Spirit Bomb, and there's translations that say that he pretty much straight up can. If he can do that, I mean, I don't see why he wouldn't be able to do Kaioken, and what would stop him? Why would that technique be off limits? I would say that the Spirit Bomb would be a much more intensive technique, a much more, I guess, harder technique to utilize just from knowledge, I guess, if that makes sense. Then again, look at Trunks and Dragon Ball Super using the freaking Spirit Bomb sword. But with Kaioken, I just don't see why he wouldn't be able to use it. As to why he didn't use it, that just comes down to writing, I think. It just wasn't thought of. There's a lot of obvious things in the series that just aren't utilized. There's many times you could say Goku should use Kaioken as a Super Saiyan in the original series, even though he obviously did it in the Otherworld Tournament filler. That was filler. It wasn't actually in the manga at any point, but yeah. I mean, he still should have used it as a Super Saiyan mastered.
They never really explained in the Dragon Ball manga itself why he didn't until Dragon Ball Super came around.
Right. And that's kind of just like, let's cover our bases, really, even though we forgot.
Yeah, so we basically had to use headcanon for the entire time. But really, when you think about it, like, if Cell can use, like, all of the techniques of the Z Fighters that he's comprised of to the point where he's eventually able to, I guess, use the instant transmission just when Cell blows himself up in proximity to Goku, then why wouldn't he be able to use this move? Because, the instant transmission, from what we know, might have actually taken Goku even longer to learn than the Kaioken, the Spirit Bomb, because Goku was taking a while to actually get to King Kai's planet on Snake Way. So, realistically, if Cell says he can use the Spirit Bomb, which seemed to be the actual ultimate technique of King Kai, and if he can use the Kamehameha, if he can use, like, the Frieza version of the Destructo Disc and the multiform, like in the filler, what's really saying that he can't or that he shouldn't be using the Kaioken, especially when he has multiple examples of when he could have used it to his own benefit.
Exactly. There's no reason why that move would be off limits in my mind. Now, Mike, as to if he did actually use it, I mean, it can go a lot of ways here. This could be a complicated answer. It could be very simple.
Yeah.
In terms of Goku, I mean, he's going to beat Goku with or without it. It's not going to matter. Goku would have lost to Cell either way. We've talked about that in a video if people want to check that out.
Yeah, we've discussed that in a video in the past as well.
But I think a lot of people understand that Goku would have lost no matter what. And Kaioken he wouldn't have used it even if he had to. But like when he fought Gohan, obviously that would be a point where he would want to use something like that when Gohan Super Saiyan 2, when Cell buffs up a lot to get more power.
Yeah.
Like how Trunks did against Cell. That would be a moment where you would think Cell would use Kaioken, but it just wasn't written like that. It wasn't thought of. It was oversight.
Yeah, and the thing is that there's even other examples throughout Cell before he becomes perfect when he could have used it as well. So when he's playing Piccolo for the first time, he reveals his plan to Piccolo in his typical I'm a bad guy moment from James Bond or whatever the other typical trope is.
All right, let me tell you your whole plan since you're gonna die anyways. I'll tell you everything.
Yeah, even though I have regeneration just like you, Piccolo, so I don't know how you forgot about that. But anyway, when Krillin and Trunks showed up and Cell was kind of outmatched, why didn't he just use the Kaioken and just kill everyone there? It would probably just take a Kaioken times like 5 and he could wipe them all out. And then when he's fighting against Vegeta, for example, Super Vegeta, when Vegeta is just, totally wrecking Cell and he's in his semi-perfect form, why didn't he use the Kaioken then either? Or why didn't he even use it against Android 16 when 16 had the advantage over him? I mean, if Cell went Kaioken times 2, you'd think he'd be able to wreck 16.
And Mike, that's just one of those situations where it just depends on what kind of fan you are, I guess, but, some people are going to say the fact that he didn't use it just means he can't. I just say it's an oversight in the writing. Obviously, he still didn't use it. It doesn't make sense why he wouldn't, but as to actually how it would have benefit him, he would have already won. He wouldn't even really need to absorb anyone. If Goku finishes training, it's another question depending on how high he can go with Kaioken.
Yeah.
But even if he was like semi-perfect, either way he's going to be perfect. His whole objective is to become perfect. He's going to do that either way. There's no way anyone can beat him. It's just impossible.
Exactly. He would just be so overwhelming. The thing is, like, if we're basing it on Goku's cells from just when he fought Vegeta, for example, and we say that the maximum he could push out is like Kaioken times 4 or 5, that would still be so significant of an increase that he would still be able to beat Goku and Vegeta, at least before Goku goes into the chamber.
Right. You might be able to say, like, things like, oh, he has to practice with it or whatever, which he very well could. He's not even going to go super perfect. He's not going to die and come back. I mean, that situation might arise.
Yeah.
Maybe he doesn't go Kaioken, but why would he, like, self-destruct, if he has Kaioken? There's no reason for that.
Well, that's the thing. If Cell could even do a Kaioken times 10,
right,
then there's an argument that his semi-perfect could have possibly beaten Gohan right then and there, even though he was dropped down. And then there is also, for me, I feel like the main reason he didn't use it when he was fighting against Gohan in their Kamehameha clash at the end of the Cell games is because he thought he was going to win. He didn't see any purpose to do it.
He does Kaioken at the end of that would be hype. If that was like his life, he's like, I just held it off till now.
I mean, if he, with all of his energy gathered, can destroy, like, the solar system.
Right.
If he goes Kaioken times 10, what, can he blow up 10 solar systems? You know, like...
Yeah. Oh, isn't Math and Dragon Ball just the best combination?
Yeah. Especially from this point and afterward.
Hypothetically, Mike, you know, just to let people know, if Goku on Namek can do times 20, you know, again, whether that's, you know, just because he's trained with Kaioken, obviously. If Cell can do that in his perfect form times 20 in the Buu Saga, Goku's base probably got about twice as strong just because, you know, this is very short power scaling here. I don't want to take up a lot of the video, but just for fun so people understand this. If Cell could do 20 times Kaioken as his perfect form, you know, given the fact that Super Saiyan Goku was weaker than Perfect Cell, and given the fact that in the Buu Saga, when Goku fought Vegeta, Goku goes Super Saiyan 2, Vegeta says, oh, at least you're stronger than your son was against Cell, implying that Goku as a Super Saiyan 2 is stronger than Gohan was when he fought Cell, but he's not stronger than Gohan when he was Super Saiyan. So what I'm getting at here with multipliers and stupid math is that Kaioken times 20 Perfect Cell will be stronger than Super Saiyan 3 Goku because what? Super Saiyan 3 is 8 times Super Saiyan 2. Again, math, it's silly. I'm just saying that he would be stronger by math.
Well, let's say that Cell killed everyone and won the Cell games, and I guess maybe left the Earth around.
All I'm saying is that he's stronger than Beerus.
But let's say that Cell, I guess, killed everyone, and then he was like, nah, I'll leave the Earth here and just hang out, you know? Or,
let me leave just Goku.
Yeah, and say Majin Buu somehow gets revived because either Cell blows up the planet.
Buu.
So you think he would be able to destroy, even if Buu was, say, at full power.
Solar Kamehameha?
Yeah.
Times 20, he'd cream him. He'd be melted. He would completely eradicate him. Especially, you know, especially considering the fact that Goku said he could have beaten the Fat Buu if he went all out. So if Goku could do it and a stronger, you know, hypothetically stronger Cell could, you know, Cell would pretty much dominate the landscape until Frieza came back. And then, you know, who knows what their interactions would be like. You know, if Filler has anything to say, you know, they'd be friends. But they wouldn't be stuck in hell together, so it's like, you know, maybe Frieza would just kill him. If
Frieza trained for 4 months and got super strong to the point where he's stronger than Super Saiyan Blue Goku, I mean, just imagine if Cell trained for years until Frieza showed up.
And if Android 17 played around with some poachers for 17 years or whatever and got stronger than Super Saiyan Blue.
Yeah, Cell really had such opportunity to be one of the most OP characters in all of fiction, just given, like, all the stuff we're seeing in Super. I mean, regardless, Cell would probably get so powerful and Beerus would come and kill him at 1% of his power or something because it wouldn't even matter because Beerus is so OP.
Not if you went Super Saiyan 4. The thing about Cell is that he's so interesting of a villain just in terms of his techniques, but the problem with him is that he's written in a way where he knows all these techniques that you can't possibly utilize all of them. It's like Buu with the Tournament of Power. I still feel like one of the reasons they just kind of kicked him out and replaced him with Frieza because, number one, Frieza's amazing in the Tournament of Power, but number two is it would be so hard to utilize all of his moves and make it, you know, fair for other fighters, really. It would be so hard to kind of cover all the bases with Buu, I think, just because he has so much. He has healing powers and everything. It's crazy.
It's also because it just makes it too easy for that character to actually be able to just destroy everyone, because with Buu, like, all he has to do is, like, use all of his powers and he can easily throw people out of the ring. He can turn them into chocolate and just chuck them out.
Throw the gum around him or whatever, like, just his stomach.
Yeah, there's so many ways that Buu could be OP in the tournament, and there's so many ways Cell could have been far more OP, but the thing is that these characters are only as smart and capable as they're written by the writers.
The whole point of this video, guys, is to let you know that Cell would have been better in the Tournament of Power than Frieza. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, if Cell trained for 4 days, he'd probably be Jiren level. You know, he'd be Ultra Instinct Cell.
Ultra Instinct Cell. Add that card to Dokkan.
Yeah, his skin would be silver or something, and he'd be a shiny Pokemon that Nappa would really want to catch. But either way, guys, this has been our video discussing what if Cell used the Kaioken and why he did it. Let us know your own thoughts down below in the comments section. Check out Josh from Dragon Ball Nation in the end card and description. As I always say, stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, even if Cell used the Super Roidal Ken, it would still be no match for me at 1% of my left quadricep.
In Dragon Ball Z, there are some scenarios which, if they had gone another way, could have drastically changed the future of the Earth and the Dragon Ball story. As the way the story unfolded, even what appears to be a minor change can result in significant ramifications. In this video, I'll be taking a look at a what-if scenario from the Cell Saga, more specifically during the time after Goku had awakened from the heart virus. However, this video will not focus on Goku, but rather the Super Namekian Piccolo and the androids. And that scenario is, what if Piccolo fought Android 18 instead of 17 in Dragon Ball Z? Well, in this video, I'm going to break that down. Now, for context, after Goku had awakened and recovered from the heart virus, he met with the Z Fighters once again and informed them that he intended to surpass the Super Saiyan wall and ascend to a new form. This was when he explained to Vegeta, who was in the midst of mental training after his humiliating defeat at the hands of Android 18, that there was a room in Kami's lookout where a single day on Earth is equal to 1 year on the inside. After learning of this, Vegeta and his alternate timeline son, Future Trunks, entered the chamber, while Goku and Gohan waited outside and Piccolo and the others returned to the Kame house. However, this is when the androids arrived. Android 16, 17, and 18 were all looking for Goku, and after Piccolo informed them that Goku was not around, they demanded Piccolo tell them his location. This is when Piccolo devised a plan to fight the androids, and possibly take down Android 17 in a one-on-one fight. However, in this scenario, let's say that Piccolo instead chose to face off against Android 18. How exactly would this change the story? Well, I think this change could be significant, as if we examine the fight between Piccolo and Android 17, it appears that Piccolo had the advantage at first, as he was able to not only deal damage to 17, but appeared to have the advantage in both strength and speed. Although this could be because Android 17 was still holding back, and the two warriors went back and forth, exchanging blows in one of the best fights in the entire franchise. However, as the time wore on, Piccolo was showing the signs of fatigue as his stamina was decreasing, while Android 17's stamina is infinite. And this is where the fight left off, without a conclusive winner, as Imperfect Cell had arrived. And with his power, which came from absorbing further multitudes of people, he defeated Piccolo and went on to absorb Android 17. Of course, as we know, this would lead to his fight with Vegeta and eventually him becoming perfect. However, a question is whether or not he would have reached this point had Piccolo instead faced off against Android 18. After all, Android 18 was specifically designed by Dr. Gero to be weaker than 17. Compared to 17, her power was suppressed in order for her to be more obedient to Gero, which of course didn't end up working. However, nonetheless, it's apparent that both 17 and Piccolo were more powerful than she was at this point in the series. And if Piccolo faced off against 18, I think he'd stand a far greater chance of defeating her in a one-on-one fight. As if Piccolo can deal damage to Android 17, he should no doubt be able to deal damage to 18. In fact, for a point during their fight, Super Saiyan Vegeta was able to fight on par with 18 after she became serious, even heavily damaging her outfit. And Vegeta's defeat only came after Piccolo pointed out that his stamina was decreasing, which allowed 18 to overtake him and break both of his arms. So looking at it relatively, if Super Saiyan Vegeta at this point was even close to Android 18's level of power, then Piccolo's power should be more than enough to defeat her, as we know that Piccolo, after fusing with Kami and regaining the power he had as the nameless Namekian, adding it to his already impressive power, had surpassed both Goku and Vegeta at this point in the story. However, perhaps the biggest piece of evidence for Piccolo winning here comes from his fight against Android 17, as during their fight, Piccolo surrounded 17 with Ki Blasts, and then hit him all at once with them using his Hell Zone grenade technique. Piccolo was rather confident that this move would destroy 17. However, it was revealed at this point that 17 had a force field which he could use to shield himself from harm. The difference between 17 and 18, however, is that 18 has never shown this capability, so it's likely exclusive to her brother 17. Thus, if Piccolo used the Hellzone grenade on 18, I think he could have won right there. Now, a question is whether or not the other androids will step in on their fight. However, as we saw, 17 fought Piccolo with no interference, and so it's likely that would happen here as well. And if he can unleash this move as quickly as he did against 17, I suspect that he would win before Cell arrives. However, once Piccolo defeats 18, this creates a very grim situation for him, as it's unlikely that 17 wouldn't try to kill him as revenge for his sister's death. And of course, Piccolo would no longer be fresh in this situation, so it's much less likely he could defeat 17, unless he could somehow fire off his light grenade or special beam cannon, which both take time to charge. And then there's the possibility of Android 16 fighting Piccolo, in which case he would wreck Piccolo just as easy as Cell did. And speaking of Cell, he would arrive at this point. However, in this scenario, Android 18 would be dead, thus he would have no realistic way of becoming perfect in the main timeline. However, there's still a possibility that he could absorb Android 17 as he did in the manga's story, in which case things would probably play out the same way here, as Cell becomes semi-perfect Cell and decimates the fighters around him. However, this time he probably wouldn't go around blowing up islands in order to find 18, but perhaps go on the hunt for Trunks' time machine to go to yet another timeline where 18 exists. However, this is when Vegeta and Trunks would emerge from the time chamber, and we would likely see the same events transpire, as Vegeta and Trunks fly off to face semi-perfect Cell. Now, as we saw in their real fight, Super Saiyan Grade 2 Vegeta decimated semi-perfect Cell, showing a clear advantage in strength and speed. And despite Cell trying his best, he was eventually forced to beg Vegeta to let him live, playing Vegeta's own pride against him, and using this to absorb Android 18. However, with Android 18 now dead, this wouldn't be an option, and I could see Vegeta or Trunks finishing Cell off. And this is where we enter what is really new territory for the series, as with Cell dead so soon, this creates a very different scenario than what we saw, with Perfect Cell defeating Vegeta and Trunks and eventually holding the Cell games. In this instance, the pseudo-tournament would never transpire. Rather, I think Vegeta's vendetta against Goku would once again take center stage, as Vegeta's goal all throughout Dragon Ball Z and up until this point had been to defeat and likely kill Goku, and it's not really until toward the end of the Buu saga that he more or less abandons this goal. And at this point in the Cell arc, Vegeta is likely still more powerful than Goku. However, Goku and Gohan were also still in the time chamber, and I suspect that Vegeta would allow them to finish training within the chamber in order to give himself a better fight, just like he did with Cell attaining his perfection. However, in this case, as well as that one, it would be a decision that would lead to his undoing, as once again Goku and Gohan would have exited the time chamber, with both being far above Vegeta and Trunks' level of power in their full-powered Super Saiyan form, a form which they spent much of their time within the room mastering. And as was demonstrated when Goku powered up for Korin, Vegeta wasn't even half as strong as Goku, and he was still weaker even after his second day in the chamber. Thus, if the two engaged in a fight, Goku would undoubtedly win. However, being Goku, I suspect that he would spare Vegeta's life once again, and Vegeta may retreat to lick his wounds. And after this, Goku would likely go to New Namek and have Dende return with him as the new guardian of the Earth, which would result in the Dragon Balls returning and Piccolo as well as the victims of Cell and the androids coming back to life. But this scenario would also significantly change what happens going forward, as Goku would still be alive on Earth and living with his family. He would never have had to intervene in Gohan and Cell's fight and sacrifice himself, and Gohan would not have gone Super Saiyan 2 during the Cell games, which would mean much of his hidden power would still lie dormant. However, Goku seemed to discover the depths of Gohan's power during their time training in the Time Chamber, which is backed up by the anime-only scene where Gohan seemingly goes beyond Super Saiyan. So it's possible that Goku would help train Gohan to access this power during the 7 years leading up to the Buu Saga, especially if Vegeta is still a looming threat throughout. And Goku would perhaps also take this opportunity to train Goten, as he would be present during these 7 years of his life, and this would no doubt result in Goten and perhaps Gohan being even stronger than they were heading into the next arc. But when we get to the next arc, some things would also change. For one, Goku likely wouldn't be as powerful as he was when he arrived during his one-day visit. This is because Goku had spent the past 7 years training in the afterlife, specifically Heaven, with King Kai and other masters. This is where Goku learned not only fusion, but how to become a Super Saiyan 2 and 3. Now I can see Goku attaining Super Saiyan 2, however Super Saiyan 3 is unlikely because Goku attained it while using a dead spiritual body, which had far less limitations than his living one. So this would mean that Goku, likely Vegeta, and possibly Gohan would all be Super Saiyan 2s. Then there's the fact that Vegeta also trained like a madman during the 7-year time skip, and this training allowed him to come close to the power that Goku had achieved in Heaven. However, as Goku was still stronger, Vegeta used the Majin boost from Babidi in order to become equal with him. However, if Vegeta trained with similar intensity to what he did while Goku was dead, he could very possibly surpass Goku by the time the Buu Saga rolls around. As much like during the 3-year time skip before the Cell Saga, Goku would probably be training outside, maybe with Gohan and Goten, and possibly even with King Kai on his planet. But Vegeta, on the other hand, would be training in a special gravity chamber under hundreds of times gravity. And like we saw in the beginning of the Cell arc, Vegeta had surpassed Goku as a result of this superior training. So if this is the case, I don't see Vegeta becoming Majin to face Goku, but rather Goku, Vegeta, or maybe Gohan in this case, would defeat Deborah and Babidi, and Buu would probably never be revived. And I'm not sure in this case that Vegeta would be goaded into allowing Buu to be revived either, as Vegeta seemed to believe that Buu was a weakling and no match for he and Goku before he was revived. Thus, it would likely be curtains for him. After this, I could see much of Dragon Ball Super turning out the same way. Beerus awakens and seeks the Super Saiyan God, Goku and Vegeta are defeated by him, Goku, or perhaps in this case Vegeta, becomes a Super Saiyan God, but still loses. They may go on to train with Whis, and Frieza would probably still be resurrected. And although Frieza would no doubt still train and achieve greater power, he wouldn't have the knowledge of Goku defeating Majin Buu, and thus may not train as long as he did prior, which could thus scale him down to Goku and Vegeta's adjusted power. However, considering just how powerful Vegeta became in 6 months training with Whis, it's possible that the difference in power between this and the current timeline Saiyans would become irrelevant. So there we have it. In this video, I addressed what would happen if Piccolo faced Android 18 instead of 17. And as I explained, many things would change significantly from how the story played out in the anime and manga. Although Piccolo himself may become largely irrelevant in the future of the story after this point, just due to how Toriyama wrote it to play out, this was a period of time when he was still very powerful and could have made a real difference. However, in this case, it came down to a simple matter of Piccolo fighting Android 17 instead of 18. But that's how Dragon Ball What Ifs typically play out, as even a minor change could make a big difference in how the story would unfold. And there is still many what-if scenarios just waiting to be explored, including one I have in mind featuring Gohan and his time on Namek. But that's a story for another day. Hey guys, it's Mike here, and in this video, I'm going to be discussing a popular what-if theory that many fans, including myself, have wondered about ever since the Cell Saga of Dragon Ball Z. This scenario revolves around Vegeta, and more specifically, what if Vegeta became a Super Saiyan 2 during the Cell games? Now for this scenario, there's really one specific point that I can think of where this transformation could have happened. That would be after Super Perfect Perfect Cell returned from his self-destruction, where he attacked and killed Vegeta's son, Future Trunks. Now, as I discussed in a previous video, did Vegeta get a rage boost when Cell attacked Trunks? It's entirely possible that Vegeta got a rage boost when he launched his attack on Cell. However, what if instead in this scenario, Trunks' death had similar effects to Krillin's death on Namek? What if instead it propelled Vegeta to attain the further transformation of Super Saiyan 2? Would this further form make any difference, or would Vegeta still be effortlessly smacked aside? Well, in this video, I'm going to discuss that. Now, according to the super exciting guides, the Super Saiyan 2 transformation multiplies the user's base power 100-fold, which is 2 times greater than the Super Saiyan form. However, this form was only attained by those who had already mastered the original Super Saiyan form. We saw this originally with Gohan during his fight against Cell, and we then saw it later on with Goku and Vegeta during the Buu Saga. However, as we see during the Cell Saga, Vegeta has a different form of Super Saiyan Grade 2. This is a form which is an enhancement of the original Super Saiyan that increases the user's muscle size and power. However, the form is inefficient compared to the mastered full power Super Saiyan. This significant difference really comes down to stamina, as the initial Super Saiyan and subsequent gains lead to greater power but also take up a lot of power transforming into them, and it also cannot be as easily suppressed. Now, some people believe that the multiplier for full power Super Saiyan is higher than that of grades 1 through 3, largely due to how powerful Goku and Gohan were portrayed to be. However, I think instead, that comes down to their base powers increasing significantly while training in the hyperbolic time chamber. And even subsequent guides which have come out since the Cell Saga have never claimed this form to be more than 50 times. But regardless, let's just say that in this scenario, the rage that Vegeta feels from Trunks' death propels him past these prerequisites which allow him to unlock the Super Saiyan 2 form. How would his power compare to Super Perfect Cell and fellow Super Saiyan 2 Gohan? Well, this is where this scenario begins to hit a snag. As we learned, after Goku and Gohan left the time chamber, Goku at only 50% of his power had surpassed both Trunks and Vegeta at their full power. This power increase was so big that it caused Vegeta to return to the chamber for another day. However, as Goku powered up to his full power against Cell, even Vegeta at this point was still significantly outmatched. Now, before this point, Vegeta believed that Goku's 50% was actually his full power, and that he had actually surpassed Goku. However, it was made clear that this was not the case. As we would go on to find out, Gohan had also surpassed Goku and Vegeta during his time in the time chamber. On top of this, Cell was also holding back significantly against both Goku and Gohan. He only unleashed his full power after Gohan had become a Super Saiyan 2, and the power-up was so large that it left Goku in a state of shock. So in terms of how much power Cell was holding back, I would put him at about 40% of his maximum power against Goku and around 50% against Gohan. Now, there's some wiggle room here, but I'm just going to use these numbers for simplification. But anyway, that would make Cell 2.5 times stronger than Goku at his 100% and 2 times stronger than Super Saiyan Gohan. Now, that sounds like it would make Gohan even with Cell once he transformed. However, this isn't taking into account Gohan's hidden power. Now, as we know, Gohan's hidden power wasn't simply a transformation. Rather, this was a pool of energy and power that Gohan could only access during moments of intense emotional distress. During climactic moments like the fight against Raditz and the fight against Frieza, Gohan's power would surge and allow him to overwhelm his much stronger opponents. During their training, Goku tried to bring out Gohan's hidden power, and even saw glimpses of it in the anime version. However, it was only through another intense situation, and once Gohan had figured out his father's plan, as well as the death of Android 16, that Gohan was able to let it all go and unleash his hidden power. This propelled him to the Super Saiyan 2 form, but it also increased his base power even further, making his Super Saiyan forms even stronger than before. So I would say that Gohan's hidden power gave him an additional 1.5 to 2 times boost, which on top of his Super Saiyan 2 made him a total of 3 to 4 times stronger. I'm going to round up to a 2 times increase for his hidden power for this example because of the sheer dominance domination that Gohan demonstrated against Cell during their fight. Now, as I've demonstrated, Vegeta was stronger than Goku's 50%, but weaker than his 100%. So I typically put Vegeta's power between 60 to 75% of Goku's. That would place Vegeta's power at around 20 to 30% of Perfect Cell's full power. So this means that if Vegeta became a Super Saiyan 2, his power would still only be 50 to 60% of Perfect Cell's power. So that means that Vegeta would still be stomped. However, as I discussed in my video, did Vegeta get a rage boost when Cell attacked Trunks? It's possible that Vegeta did get a rage boost because of the reaction of those around him, and because he made Super Perfect Cell put invisible effort and strain to withstand Vegeta's attack. And Cell's suppressed level at the time was likely on the same level as, or greater than, his previous 100%. So to simplify this, if we were to say that Vegeta is, say, 33% of Perfect Cell's full power, and then we say that Vegeta got around 3 times stronger with the rage boost, and then we give him the additional 2 times boost of Super Saiyan 2, then from that perspective, it's possible that Vegeta could reach the same tier of power as Gohan and Cell. However, this is really highballing Vegeta, and on top of that, this rage boost wouldn't be the same thing as Gohan's hidden power, because Gohan at that point could tap into his hidden power at will. Vegeta would be getting a temporary boost, which may only last about as long as the Flurry of Blast that we saw in the anime and manga. So even with a rage boost and the Super Saiyan 2 transformation on top of it, Vegeta may only be temporarily on par with Cell, and more likely still far below him. As a result, in a one-on-one fight, Vegeta would still be handily defeated. But what about the scenario where he teams up with Gohan? Would this make any difference? Well, while it's likely that Vegeta would not be in the same tier of power as the two of them, he could still serve as a distraction and something which could give Gohan more openings to attack Cell. Now, because of Vegeta's interference in the original story, we never actually saw a real one-on-one fight between Super Saiyan 2 Gohan and Super Perfect Cell. However, due to what Goku was saying to Gohan during their Kamehameha clash, I think that Gohan was still more powerful than Super Perfect Cell at this time. And despite knowing Cell's power had increased and observing the fight through King Kai, Goku still believed that Gohan could win. So I tend to think that Gohan could have won here even though Cell was now stronger and also knew instant transmission. So as long as Vegeta doesn't become a liability on the battlefield like he originally did, his involvement would likely make the fight even easier for Gohan. Because if Gohan charges up a full power Kamehameha while Cell is distracted with Vegeta, then Gohan could once again use the opening to blast and destroy the bio-android, just like he did during the climactic moments of the Cell games. So there we have it. I believe I've demonstrated that if Vegeta became a Super Saiyan 2, he likely still wouldn't be on the same level of power as Gohan and Cell. However, he might have been able to provide some assistance to Gohan where others could not. As far as the transformation itself goes, I always thought it would be a cool alternate ending to the arc if Gohan and Vegeta both went Super Saiyan 2 and teamed up to defeat Cell. Imagining them fighting side by side after all they had been through, sometimes as enemies and sometimes as allies, it would have been a nice bit of storytelling and character development for both of them. However, in the real story, it might have ended as quickly as it began, with Cell effortlessly defeating Vegeta just like he did when he attacked him in the Cell Saga. Because Vegeta may be a badass character who worked hard to achieve everything he has and has a very dedicated fan base, but his plot armor will likely never be as strong as Goku or his sons. Well, at least before Goku came back in the Buu Saga and then took it all for himself. Good going, Goku, you sure know how to share that spotlight. Alright guys, so let me know your own thoughts down below in the comments. What do you think would happen if Vegeta became a Super Saiyan 2? Do you think he would have made a difference, and would you have liked to see this happen? Let me know down below. And if you're new to this channel, then make sure to subscribe and enable notifications so that you can see all of my videos right away when they come out. And if you like this video, then make sure to stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future. Hey guys, it's Mike here, and in this video, I'm going to be discussing a particular what-if scenario that I think may have made a significant difference to the story that we saw in Dragon Ball Z. This scenario revolves around future Trunks and his timeline, and more specifically, what if future Trunks went to New Namek? Now for context here, when Androids 17 and 18 first appeared in the future Trunks timeline, nearly all of the Z-Fighters were killed during their initial attack. This included the human members as well as their most powerful fighters like Vegeta. However, Piccolo's death was the one that was felt the most, as when Piccolo died, Kami died along with him. And just like when he first died in the Saiyan saga, this meant that the Dragon Balls became inert. As a result, there was no way of wishing back those who had died, which is why Trunks' situation was so dire. However, there was another set of Dragon Balls in Universe 7 that were still active at the time and could have repaired most of the damage. Those would be the new Namekian Dragon Balls. However, Trunks never used these Dragon Balls in his timeline. Now, it's likely that Trunks knows of the planet's existence, as his mother Bulma and Master Gohan both traveled to the original Namek and would have certainly told Trunks the details of the events. However, I think the reason that they never traveled to New Namek is because they were unaware of the planet's location. As we saw in the Cell Saga, Goku was unable to locate New Namek from Earth with his instant transmission. As a result, Goku had to travel to King Kai's planet and ask him to find it. However, as it would become abundantly clear throughout the story of future Trunks, the surviving Earthlings were unable to rely on that resource, because for some reason, King Kai never appeared to contact them. The reason for this has been speculated on for many years since the Cell Saga originally aired, and I actually covered this in another video which you can check out on my channel. However, for whatever reason, King Kai never got in contact with those on Earth, so they had to rely on their own power to survive. This is likely why Bulma decided to create the time machine, because they had no other option in their own universe. Now, as an aside, it's possible that the hyperbolic time chamber still existed, but they were clearly unaware of it at the time. However, it's possible that if they did know the location of New Namek, Bulma would have devoted her resources to creating a ship to travel to it instead of a time machine. So when is a likely point that this could have happened? Well, for the first part of the scenario, let's say that King Kai actually did get in contact with the dead Z-Fighters, and they explained the situation to him, at which point he located New Planet Namek. Then, after this, he gets in contact with Bulma, like he did at the end of the Frieza arc. Now, what would have happened? Well, as we learned in the manga, the androids attacked Capsule Corp. This destroyed most of the resources that Bulma had on hand to create various inventions. This event is in large part why it took so long for her to create a working time machine, as well as the fuel for each trip. So it's likely that Bulma would have had to scrape together the components to create a new spaceship. If it were to take anywhere near as long as it did to create the time machine, this would still require years of work before they could make the trip. The only way that it would be done sooner is if they still had the Ginyu space pod that Goku used to escape planet Namek. Because, as we saw in the Frieza arc, Dr. Brief was able to transform Goku's space pod into the larger ship that he used to travel to Namek. So if they had the Ginyu pod, it's likely that they would be able to leave much sooner. However, we have to keep in mind that the Z-Fighters were massacred by the androids when they fought them. Even Super Saiyan Vegeta stood no chance. Additionally, it's possible that Goku would not be able to be revived, considering he died of natural causes, although that clause of the Dragon Ball rules is a little iffy. But in either case, it would make more sense to wait before bringing them back so that they could train in the afterlife, perhaps under King Kai's tutelage. So because we don't know how long it would take for Bulma to create the spaceship or to travel to New Namek, we're going to have to take some creative liberties here with the date. However, if we say that it takes as long as it did for her to create the time machine, and then they gather the Dragon Balls to wish the Z-Fighters back, then the odds would be even more stacked in their favor, because the Z-Fighters at this point would have been training for well over 10 years, and all of this while having dead spiritual bodies that would be far less limited. We saw just how powerful Goku became from the 7 years of training in heaven, so just imagine if he was there even longer along with the other members of his team. They may wind up even more powerful than they were in the Cell games, or perhaps even in the Buu saga. So if the newly revived Z-Fighters returned to the Earth, then they would have easily defeated 17 and 18. Now with 17 and 18 destroyed, this would leave Cell with no way to achieve his perfect form. So if he attempted to get revenge, he would be easily destroyed by the Saiyans or Piccolo. Now as a reminder, this scenario so far has relied on King Kai telling Bulma the location of New Namek. However, it's also possible that Trunks may have learned this information like he did in the original story, that being when Goku recruited Dende. Perhaps in this case, Trunks would receive more specific details about the location, and then travel there after he returned to his future. As for another counterpoint, it's possible that the Namekians would be wary of letting outsiders use the Dragon Balls. But as we saw in the Buu saga, they were more than willing to help the Earthlings, and even upgraded their Dragon Balls for mass resurrections. So in either case, this would result in the destruction of the androids and Cell. But what exactly would happen in the following years? Well, this leads into the events we learned about in Dragon Ball Super. As Trunks revealed to Goku and friends, Babidi and Dabura also came to the Earth in his future. However, due to either the butterfly effect, the lowered population of the Earth, or both, they arrived much later than in the main timeline. As Trunks explained, he and the Supreme Kai Shin fought Babidi and Dabura, defeating them. This prevented Majin Buu from escaping, however at a hefty price, as Shin would be killed during the battle. With Shin's death, Beerus also died, leaving the 7th universe without a god of destruction. This is what allowed Goku Black to travel to and lay waste to Trunks' future, because without Beerus, no one could stop his plans. However, in this scenario, things would take a different turn. With Goku, Gohan, and Vegeta around, they'd be able to easily defeat Dabura and Babidi, as well as preventing Buu's resurrection. Although, even if Buu were to be released in this scenario, like if Vegeta were to become Majin again, he would still be outmatched by the Saiyans and Piccolo and defeated regardless. With their defeat, Supreme Kai would have likely survived the conflict, meaning that Beerus would still be alive and Goku Black would never travel to this timeline. However, even if he did, and if he teamed up with Zamasu, I don't think he would pose anywhere near the same level of threat as before, and would likely be defeated by the Z-Fighters and Trunks. This means that Trunks would never need to return to the past for help. As a result, the future Earth would continue to rebuild, future Bulma would survive, and Trunks would live a more normal life, perhaps even with future Mai if they get together in this version of the events. Now, what happens after this point would be a mystery. As in Dragon Ball Super, Trunks' timeline was erased by Zeno, and we never saw what happened after Trunks went to the new duplicate timeline. However, it's possible that things would unfold similarly to how they did in Dragon Ball Super, although much like the arrival of Buu, they would be delayed. Perhaps, for example, the Oracle Fish told Beerus to sleep for even longer, up to the time when all of these events were sorted out. That would provide an in-universe answer for why he didn't show up in Trunks' timeline, because the Super Saiyan God ritual could not be performed with only one Saiyan being alive. However, in this new scenario, finding the 6 Saiyans to do the ritual would prove difficult, especially considering that Goku may not return due to his death from the heart virus. However, if he did, and if Trunks and Gohan happened to find girlfriends, we could perhaps have another Pan situation where they participate in the ritual, although that might be kind of a stretch. Either way, if a Super Saiyan God is created, it would still lose to Beerus. However, it's possible that Beerus would spare the Earth like he did in Battle of Gods, seeing both the potential and the delicious food that it holds. What would happen after this is up in the air. Perhaps Trunks and friends would train with Whis. Maybe Frieza would be resurrected only for Trunks to cut him down again. Then maybe we would see a future version of the Universe 6 tournament, or even the Tournament of Power. The sky would really be the limit at this point. So in conclusion, if Trunks traveled to New Namek, it would have had significant changes for the story. Now, as for why this didn't happen in the main story, as I've discussed in other videos, it really comes down to the story that Toriyama wanted to tell. Sure, King Kai could have told Trunks and Bulma about New Namek, or the Z-Fighters could have used one-day visits to defeat the androids and then wish themselves back, but that would have taken away from the tension and threat level in the future Trunks timeline. So Toriyama simply elected to ignore these concepts for the time being. However, as I've demonstrated here, if Trunks and Bulma did travel to New Namek, then things would have turned out much better for our heroes in the end. So what do you guys think would happen if Trunks went to New Namek? Let me know down below. Also, if you're new to this channel, then make sure to subscribe and enable notifications so that you can see all of my videos right away when they come out. And if you like this video, then make sure to stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, the stupid Trunks can go to the natty New Namek all he wants, but the Dragon Balls will never help him to defeat me.
In Dragon Ball Z, audiences were introduced to Dr. Gero, a mastermind of the Red Ribbon Army who created their powerful line of androids. His goal was world domination, however, it was foiled by Goku. After the Red Ribbon Army's defeat, Gero spied on Goku and his friends in order to ascertain their strengths and weaknesses. This went on for many years, however, he stopped before they left for Namek. This proved to be a costly error, as Goku had significant development on Namek, becoming far stronger and even unlocking the legendary form of Super Saiyan. This mistake in large part led to Gero's defeat and gave the Earthlings a chance against his androids. But what if Gero actually did follow Goku to Namek and learned about Super Saiyan much sooner? How would this change the story, and would it lead his androids to total victory? Well, in this video, we're going to discuss that. Okay guys, so joining me in this video is someone you've seen on my channel in the past, and his name is...
Hey guys, it's Josh from Dragon Ball Nation here.
Okay Josh, so this is something that a lot of fans have talked about over the years and have very often asked me this question. What if Dr. Gero knew about Namek as well as Super Saiyan and perhaps sent along one of his spies to follow Goku and friends when they were on the planet? So, you know, obviously, as we know in the Dragon Ball Z story, when they first meet with androids 19 and 20, Goku asked them if they had followed Goku and everyone's progress in space. And what Dr. Gero, Android 20, tells him is that they didn't think that it was necessary for them to actually follow their progress because at that point they believed that they had extrapolated enough evidence to tell them even the most ridiculous level of growth that Goku and his friends would be able to reach. So, of course, as we saw in the main story, when Goku transformed into a Super Saiyan in front of Dr. Gero, he and Android 19 were pretty shocked because Goku's level of power far exceeded what they had believed. So, what if in this example, instead of Dr. Gero being ignorant, which is one of the main reasons for his downfall, he actually did follow through and was extremely thorough about this and did follow their progress on Namek? What do you think the ramifications for this would have to be? Let's first start off with Dr. Gero and Android 19 themselves, because if they knew just how powerful Goku had become on Namek, and then they had projected his own training and what levels of power he would be able to reach, how strong do you think that they'd be able to make themselves? And do you think that Gero would actually be able to make himself and 19 capable of taking on the even more powerful Goku and possibly Vegeta than he had expected?
That's actually a really good point because I was only thinking of Android 17, 18 for this video. Now, if you're talking about how strong Gero and 19 could have became, I'm not really sure what was the whole point of making 17 and 18 if Gero and 19 could have gotten so much stronger themselves, right? Maybe that's a plot hole, I guess.
Well, there's a lot of those in the Cell Saga.
Like, what was the purpose of 17, 18? Were they just so special? I guess since Gero and 19 are so artificial, maybe they can't get as strong. But then look at 16. You know, he's completely artificial and he's, you know, powerful than both 17 and 18. I don't think Gero knew what he was doing until he made 21, but if he could have made him and 19 a lot stronger then, yeah, I guess the Z Fighters would have been messed up, but I feel like there must have been a limit on how strong he could have made himself and 19. I mean, if 17, 18, and 16 and Cell even were all necessary. Of course, I suppose some of that is, yes, part to where he wants to kill Goku. He wants there to be someone to kill Goku. But also, I mean, creating a perfect organism like Cell, there's obviously some scientific goal there, right? He's trying to reach a goal with making such a creature. But yeah, I mean, I'm not so sure he could have made him in 19 stronger, but who knows?
Yeah, that's a good point. And, you know, I think when it came to 17, 18, he wanted to take on more of the Dr. Frankenstein kind of role that we saw with somebody like Bobbity, where he was this character who wasn't really powerful on his own, but he had these super powerful monsters of sorts that he could control and he could tell them to do whatever he wanted. But as we saw in the manga, through the Android ABCs, where it explained that Android 17 and 18 were quote-unquote failures because they didn't listen to him, ultimately, obviously, that plan didn't work out. And when it comes to Android 19 and 20 specifically, I feel like possibly because of the nature of what Android android they were, they wouldn't necessarily be able to have a base power that's like at the level of like Super Saiyan Goku or Vegeta. And the reason I say that also ties into another video I did where I discussed how powerful 19 and 20 were, which you could check out on my channel, in which I discussed how the reason why Gero likely made himself an energy absorption model is because his body was old and he probably wouldn't have been able to go through the same procedures that he had put 17 and 18 through. So I feel like that maybe his goal was that through absorbing energy, he'd be able to make himself far more powerful. So it's possible that even though the new Super Saiyans would be stronger than him, he still would be arrogant enough to believe that he and 19 would be able to absorb their power and make that power difference moot. So in that case, I could see pretty much the same situation playing out where Goku and Vegeta still are able to defeat them. And like Piccolo even said, which is something interesting when he was fighting Dr. Gero, was that even if you absorb our energy, it doesn't really mean that you know how to use it as well as we can, because by that point in time, Piccolo, Goku, and some of the other fighters had been able to figure out that they could use their energy in even higher, more exponential amounts through short bursts, which means that even though Gero might be able to have a stronger base level than, you know, a certain character, for example, he might not be able to beat them because he simply can't amplify his power the same way and use it with anywhere near as much assurance as they can. So this leads us into talking about another pair of androids, and those are 17 and 18, which in this case, Josh, I almost feel like would be the much bigger deal, because even though we don't know when Dr. Gero really started to work on 17 and 18, you know, when he started to give them their enhancements and started to change them at the molecular level, the question becomes, if he were influenced by the power of what he saw in Namek, would he not possibly try and make them even stronger first, just in case Goku and friends were to be able to rival their level of power after their own training before they were to, say, encounter them? And if so, do you think that there's any real way that they'd be able to win? Or I guess if we look at the original timeline, do you think that there's a way that Gohan or Trunks would be able to even survive long enough to go back in time and save the world, basically, from their own incursion?
That's a good point. If we're going on the notion that they would get stronger, knowing the data from the Super Saiyan form and knowing to, you know, obviously calculate for that, I don't see any situation where in either timeline the Z Fighters could have survived, really. Like, there's no situation where future Gohan would have been able to hold his own in some capacity, I guess, even though, especially in the manga, I mean, 17 was like way outclassing future Gohan and Trunks. I mean, that would be a joke, really, to even try to compete with them. So it really would just be nothing but running away, unless we were to say that maybe 17, 18 were holding back so that Gohan would perform exactly the same. You know, they would be having fun with the Gohan, basically, again. It would just be that they'd be holding back more power in the future. If that were the case, and that, you know, all the events occurred and Trunks still comes to the past and we get to the situation where they meet Gero and they know about the lab and all that stuff, the only real way I can see them kind of winning here is if, for whatever reasons, the androids are in their chambers a little longer and they can get in there and destroy everything before they wake up and whatnot. But I mean, the amount of power those androids theoretically would have, it's a joke. It really is. I can't think of a character that would rival their power. Not necessarily that there'd be no one stronger, but I can't think of who I would compare the androids to.
Well, I feel like in this scenario, even Piccolo, like after he absorbed Kami, like he was a little stronger than Android 17.
Right, 17 had the stamina advantage because he doesn't run out of energy.
Yeah, so I'm sure that if they were to have been made even more powerful, that I feel like Piccolo wouldn't have been able to stand a chance even against Android 18 in that example.
Absolutely not. Even if they got 25% stronger, that really would have been enough, in all honesty.
Yeah, and as we've talked about in previous videos, which you could also check out on my channel, we've discussed that even a 20% difference is enough to overpower your opponent and kind of have them beat in Dragon Ball. But I do think that there is a possible way that they could win, which would be using the hyperbolic time chamber, because as we saw in the Cell Saga, you know, in the actual main timeline, even when the Z Fighters trained, they were defeated by Android 17 and 18. So if everything were to play out similarly, where Trunks was able to go back in time and he was able to warn the Z Fighters and they trained and everything like that, maybe 17 and 18 spared them just like they did in their main timeline.
I think that's plausible too, because I mean, they were already trying to play with them.
Yeah, exactly. So if they were to go in the time chamber, I think that even though they would be made stronger, I think that Goku, Gohan, Vegeta, and Trunks would still be able to beat 17, 18, and 16 at that
that point, even though 16 could still blow himself up.
I agree, but what if the same thing played out and the story was essentially the same, where maybe Vegeta's holding off 17 this time, right? And they're kind of equal, like it's a Piccolo and 17 situation again, but Cell absorbs 17. Is Cell gonna be stronger with these new calculations in place? And if Cell reaches perfect form, I mean, is there really a chance then? Probably not.
That's a really good point, and it's very possible because Cell, through Dr. Gero's computer, only really learned about the power of the Super Saiyan after they were on Earth, essentially. So basically, you know, in the main timeline, the main Cell would have learned about it by Trunks killing Frieza and King Cold, whereas in the original timeline, he would have learned about it by Goku killing Frieza and King Cold as a Super Saiyan.
Right.
So if Dr. Gero had learned about the Super Saiyan over a year before that happened, then it's possible that Cell's development would have been fundamentally changed, which means that he could have been even more powerful during his initial imperfect form when he first comes out of the tank.
And not only that, maybe the fact that 17, 18 would be stronger would automatically make his power more, but we're still not even 100% sure on how Cell's metamorphosis kind of increases his power. Is it, you know, a set level? Does it matter how strong 17 is or not, right? Like, if he absorbs 17 from Super, would he get way stronger than he was in the Cell Saga? Who knows? Probably.
I would definitely think so, considering that freaking 17 from Super is Super Saiyan Blue level, which is insane, but, you know, that's a whole other different story. So I think that if Cell is even more powerful than before, and he could still attain his perfect form with even stronger androids, then I don't even know if Super Saiyan 2 Gohan from the Cell games would have been able to stop him, so...
I don't even think it's a chance, especially if he does come back as Super Perfect Cell, you know, with a self-destruct. I mean, because, you know, you can make arguments to who was even stronger in the original fight, but even if they're around equal, this stronger Cell, I mean, there would just be too much. It's too much stuff, yeah.
It would be pretty crazy. So I think that this would result in a negative outcome for everyone if Dr. Gero were to learn about Super Saiyan even earlier. Whether it's him and 19 who defeat everyone, 17 and 18, or perhaps Cell, I'm not too sure that they'd actually be able to make it past the Cell games, and I'm not even sure if they'd be able to make it past the original timeline because they might just wipe out Gohan and Trunks right then and there.
I mean, maybe a Spirit Bomb will work. The thing that we have to remember, Mike, is that if this timeline is going down differently, if these characters are a lot stronger than they should have been, if Cell turns into a bigger threat, then their approach to how they fight him is going to be different. So maybe there is a thing where all the Z fighters are working together, hold down Cell, and they do a Spirit Bomb and that kills him. It's possible, but if the timeline plays out the same or similar, then everyone's screwed.
Yeah, so let us know your own thoughts down below in the comments. What do you think would happen if Dr. Gero knew about Namek and Super Saiyan before he actually did in the main story? Also, make sure to check out Dragon Ball Nation in the end screen description. I'm sure he'll upload eventually. I mean, even Super Jane came back, so there's hope for Dragon Ball Nation yet. And if you're new to this channel, make sure to subscribe and to enable notifications so that you can see all of my videos right away when they come out. And if you like this video, then make sure to stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, even if the Dr. Gero knew about the super gainer gene on the natty Namek, he would never stand a chance at absorbing my gains. Splow!
In the Cell Saga of Dragon Ball Z, the titular villain Cell proposed a tournament during which he would challenge the heroes of the Earth to combat. The stakes of the competition were incredibly high, as if Cell won, it would mean the destruction of not only the Earth, but countless worlds across the universe. In the first match, Cell would go on to defeat Goku. However, it was an unexpected warrior, Goku's son Gohan, who defeated Cell. Despite the bio-android's incredible power and laundry list of abilities, it was a child who ultimately destroyed him and put an end to his plans. But what if Cell was victorious in his battle against Gohan? How would this change the story? Well, in this video, I'm going to discuss that. Now, as you can imagine, this scenario would have resulted in some massive changes to the Dragon Ball story. But before we get to those changes, when could this have realistically happened? Well, if for the sake of the scenario we assume that everything transpired as it did up until Gohan stepping in to face Cell, I can see at least 2 points in the fight during which it could have happened. The first would be any time before Gohan became a Super Saiyan 2. Now, Cell was clearly toying with both Goku and Gohan during his fights against them, likely suppressing himself to somewhere around 50 to 60% of his power against Super Saiyan Gohan, which I explain a little bit more in depth in my video about what if Vegeta became a Super Saiyan 2 during the Cell games. Although Gohan's power was greater than Goku's, due to his pacifist nature, he wasn't putting up much of a fight against Cell. Gohan's transformation mirrored the events surrounding Vegeta, allowing Cell to become perfect. Just like with Vegeta, it was Cell's own arrogance that pushed Gohan to become a Super Saiyan 2, which then caused Cell's downfall. Had Cell simply gone full power, he would have been able to easily defeat Super Saiyan Gohan, and then the rest of the Z fighters wouldn't be able to stop him from killing them and destroying the Earth. The next point where this could have happened was when Cell returned from his self-destruction and became Super Perfect Cell. If we take a look at the original version of this scene, when Cell returned, he was concealed in smoke. When they sensed his ki, the Z fighters were caught off guard, and in that brief instant he fired a blast that hit future Trunks and killed him. Over the years, I've heard many people claim that this was because Cell saw Trunks as a threat, but based upon Cell's dialogue, it seems to have been completely random. However, realistically, if Cell had locked on to Gohan's energy and attacked him, he could have possibly killed him. After all, Gohan was only a Super Saiyan at the time. This is backed up by the fact that Super Saiyan 2 Gohan was injured by one of Cell's similar blasts that he used against Vegeta. It's also at that following point that Cell could have potentially defeated Gohan. Now, I'm not going to get too deep into the power scaling here, but I believe that Gohan's full strength was higher than Cell's during their Kamehameha clash, due to Gohan's statement of his ki being cut in half, and what Goku says about him holding back. It was once again Gohan's mind that made him think he was weaker than he really was. However, when we think about it, Cell never needed to use the Kamehameha in the first place. He simply wanted to show off his newfound power and invoke a final terror in his opponents before destroying them and their entire solar system. But realistically, if Cell engaged and injured Gohan in hand-to-hand combat, he would have defeated him, especially if Cell took advantage of Gohan's broken arm and utilized instant transmission, which he had just acquired from Goku. There's still the slim possibility that Gohan could win due to plot armor, but let's just say that Cell wins here and move on to the next point. If Cell defeated Gohan in any of these scenarios, his next targets would obviously be the remaining Z fighters, and unfortunately for them, they wouldn't stand a chance against Perfect or Super Perfect Cell. Even if they all ganged up on him, he'd still wipe them all out. So unless fortune teller Baba got Gohan from Otherworld for a one-day visit in less than 30 seconds, the Earth is going to be blown up pretty quickly. And we all know that Toriyama forgot about one-day visits during this arc anyway. Now at this point, I suspect that Cell would essentially become like Majin Buu, only with more focus and intent. Cell saw himself as the perfect life form, and not only that, but he was a walking, talking weapon of mass destruction. Upon his return from self-destruction, he seemed to really embrace that identity, seeing himself becoming a harbinger of the end. So it's likely that if Cell completely won here, he would have swept throughout the universe, wiping out planets and solar system after solar system. Although I suspect that Cell would indulge himself like he did on Earth, and challenge the residents of the different worlds to other Cell games. But of course, they wouldn't prove much of a challenge to his incredible power, so I could see this affecting him on a psychological level, where he craves a challenge but is endlessly unsatisfied with what he finds. Kind of like Saitama from One Punch Man. And even more ironic is that due to Cell's genetic makeup, possessing both the cells of the Saiyans and Frieza's race, he would only continue to increase in power as he did this, especially when you take into account that he never really trained or pushed himself, aside from his fights against the Z fighters and a brief scene in the anime where he was punching asteroids in space. Not that I minded that scene, of course. And being in possession of Namekian traits, Cell would also be very long-lived, meaning that this could go on for centuries. However, there are threats that Cell might encounter along the way. The first of these would be Babidi and Deborah. Before coming to the Earth, Babidi was exploring the universe seeking strong fighters with evil in their hearts to manipulate into becoming his minions. Had Babidi encountered Cell, he would have no doubt attempted to take over his mind and make him his his slave. Cell certainly had the prerequisite evil that was required for this enslavement, however, I'm not so sure that it would work. That's because of what happened with Vegeta in the Buu saga. Despite Vegeta allowing himself to fall under Babidi's spell, he was still able to resist Babidi's commands and even try to destroy him. As we know, Cell was in possession of Vegeta's cells, and perhaps as a result, his mental fortitude. So if Vegeta could resist Babidi's spell, then perhaps Cell could too. If so, then Cell would likely have to fight Dabura, which could prove very challenging. Dabura was initially described by Goku as being around the same level of power as Cell. Of course, many people say, well, which Cell? And often go with perfect Cell, usually to downplay Dabura based upon things that they see after this statement. However, I believe that Goku meant super perfect Cell, because he appeared to sense what was going on during the Kamehameha clash with Gohan. This is why he believed that Gohan was still holding back and that he could defeat Cell. After all, if he couldn't sense either of their powers, then how could he make these judgments? Not to mention that Dabura served as a sort of stand-in for Cell in this arc, being offered up as a sacrifice to Buu to establish his overwhelming power, a tactic which Toriyama would often utilize with his newer, stronger antagonists. The Cell comparison ties into that. Goku would eventually go on to say that Dabura was stronger than he thought upon learning that he was a magic user. And considering Goku thought Dabura was as strong as the last Cell that he sensed, then that means that Toriyama is trying to tell us that Dabura was actually stronger than Super Perfect Cell, which again helped to make Buu seem even tougher when he beat him. And if that's really the case, then that means that he could possibly win here. However, depending upon just how long after the Cell saga this fight takes place, Cell's power may have increased by leaps and bounds. Now, when it comes to my own personal estimate, I don't believe that Dabura was many times stronger than Cell. Even 2 times seems to be pushing it considering his fight against Gohan, who had weakened after years of peace. So if Cell became 2 to 3 times stronger before this fight, I'd say he wins. And considering just how many times stronger Android 17, who is one of Cell's components, became after fighting poachers and doing minimal training on Earth for years, I'd say this is likely a conservative estimate, especially if we use Dragon Ball Super scaling. Although it's still possible that Dabura and his stone spit stops him here. But let's continue on in this scenario. The next big threat would have to be Beerus. Be it at the same time as in the original story or years later, he would eventually wake from his slumber and realize that Cell had gone on a rampage. Now, even though Cell would be growing stronger on his own over these years, he wouldn't be able to do much against Beerus. Despite all the training that Frieza went through, he couldn't even touch Beerus. The same goes for Goku and Vegeta, who trained with Beerus' master Whis and attained god forms. The only way that they stand a chance is by fusing or when Goku taps into Ultra Instinct. So I don't think that Cell going around the universe blowing things up would prepare him for a fight against a god of destruction. Thus, if Beerus felt like destroying Cell, it would be over as quickly as he could say Hakai. Although, maybe Beerus would stop himself just long enough to see if Cell was the Super Saiyan God. Because after all, Cell was part Saiyan. And besides him, only 2 other full-blooded Saiyans would exist in Universe 7 at this point. And no, Tarble doesn't count, he's still stuck in canon limbo for now. But I digress, I'm not quite sure that Cell had the genetic makeup to become a Super Saiyan God, especially without godly training. Even if he were to say spawn 5 other Cell Juniors, none of them exactly have what I would call a righteous heart. So unless Cell figures out Ultra Instinct or Duracell really quickly, something tells me that Beerus is going to have him on the menu for dinner. But let's get back to those other 2 Saiyans for a moment. Those 2 Saiyans being Paragus and his son Broly, who were stranded on the planet Vampa. Now Broly had a very large power level to say the least, even though much of his potential was untapped. So it's possible that while going from planet to planet, Cell would sense Broly's energy and travel to him. And as anyone who's seen Dragon Ball Super Broly knows, this would be a very bad idea. Cell may try to antagonize Broly and challenge him to a fight like those he faced before this point. But based upon Broly's performance in the movie, this fight wouldn't last very long. Considering that Broly was already comparative to base Vegeta when they began their fight, and base Vegeta as copy Vegeta was able to one-shot Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks years before this movie takes place. But even if we highball Cell's strength and say that he got ridiculously more powerful by the time he encounters Broly, like let's say on par with Golden Frieza, this fight would still go badly for him, because Broly would only continue to rapidly increase in power as they fought. And if Cell still hasn't learned from the arrogance that he displayed when facing Gohan, it's likely that he would allow Broly to increase in strength, or even go Super Saiyan, leading to Cell's downfall. So unless Cell blew up the planet or teleported away before this happened, Broly would go maximum all over him. Now I'm sure people will immediately comment, well, Cell could just absorb Broly, Beerus, or Deborah, especially those who haven't finished watching yet. But aside from in Dragon Ball GT and probably some video game or fanfic out there are 0 examples of Cell trying to absorb someone after he became perfect. The only time he considered absorbing other fighters was before this point, and that was only to increase his power so that he could complete his mission and fuel his evolution, which again was pre-perfection. It's entirely possible that he lost the ability to absorb people after becoming perfect, and his tail only existed to asexually reproduce the Cell Juniors. Either way, he wouldn't be absorbing them, and even if he tried, they would probably stop it from happening. It's interesting to think what would happen if Cell was left to his own devices. Maybe he would create more Cell Juniors, who would spread throughout the universe like locusts, sapping worlds of their resources and then destroying them. Or maybe over time, in his unending boredom, Cell would realize that endless destruction serves no real purpose, and instead become a sort of guardian for the mortal plane. But nonetheless, his time would still be limited, because even if Cell never encountered Beerus or Broly, Zeno would no doubt erase Universe 7 for its low mortal level, which Cell would have made even worse by this time. There would be no Goku to propose the Tournament of Power, so Cell would be erased along with the rest of his universe, and that would be the end for Cell. So as for the question of what if Cell defeated Gohan in Dragon Ball Z, he would have no doubt caused widespread destruction throughout the universe. However, eventually this would come to an end, be it at the hands of a demon, a Saiyan, or of a god. And as with many other what-if scenarios that see Goku die before his time, this one would end in the worst-case scenario, with Universe 7 ceasing to exist. So maybe Cell was better off being vaporized by Gohan after all, especially if they bring him back someday. But until then, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and make sure to stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future. In the original timeline of Dragon Ball Z, all of the events we know from the story unfolded the same way up until after the characters returned from Namek. Goku still defeated Frieza after transforming into the legendary Super Saiyan. But nonetheless, Frieza survived their encounter and came to the Earth for revenge. After he touched down the planet with his father King Cold, it was the original Goku who arrived using instant transmission and proceeded to defeat both of them. Something I discussed in depth in this video here. Upon defeating these galactic tyrants, Goku became indisputably the most powerful mortal in the universe. There was no one alive in his reality, or at least awake if you count Beerus and Majin Buu, who could have defeated him at this point. Nonetheless, a great enemy would still claim Goku's life. This was not a fighter, but rather a virus, the Heart Virus. This led to a chain of events where the Earth was decimated by the arrival of the androids, 2 terrible enemies who killed all of the Z fighters except for Gohan, although that wouldn't last for long. It was up to Trunks and Bulma to find a way to defeat them, which they eventually did. But even after this, their timeline was still ravaged by the fallen god Zamasu and erased by the Omni King Zeno. However, what if Goku never got the Heart Virus and died? How would this affect the story? Well, in this video, I'm going to discuss that. Now, assuming that Goku never got the Heart Virus, there would be some immediate changes to the story. The first of these would be that Goku would continue his training on Earth and grow even stronger. Now, we don't entirely know how much time passed between Goku's original death and the arrival of the androids. The manga never provides us with this information, but if we go by the History of Trunks special, it doesn't seem like it was too long after this event. So it likely happened sometime toward the end of the 3-year gap, a little while before it happened in the main timeline. After all, Goku is off training in the wilderness and not near society where the virus likely started. And no, it didn't come from Yardrat, there's nothing in the manga or the anime that implies that. So let's say that it happened about a year before. This would give Goku an additional year of training before the androids arrive. This is where the fight begins, as 17 and 18 begin attacking the city in order to lure out Goku and the other Z fighters, just as 19 and 20 did in the main timeline. According to History of Trunks Special, the first one to arrive on the scene was Piccolo. He was the first to try, and the first to die, as the English dub narrator so unfortunately put it. This immediately made it to where the Dragon Balls were removed from the equation and could no longer wish back any of the Z fighters. However, in this case, things would be a little bit different because Goku has the ability of instant teleportation. With this ability, he would be able to instantly go to the fight once he's able to lock onto an energy source. Unfortunately, because the androids have no ki and cannot be sensed by Goku, he wouldn't be able to go directly to them and would have to wait for Piccolo to begin fighting. Now, considering in the original timeline Piccolo never trained with Goku, he'd be far less powerful here. As a result, I think it's likely that they would still kill him. However, Goku would arrive at this point and encounter the androids. This is where the true fight would begin, as Goku would transform into a Super Saiyan and get ready to fight. Now, considering how androids 17 and 18 usually fight, it's likely that the first fight would be one-on-one, with 17 stepping up to fight Goku. 17 would be confident in his ability to win and kill his enemy, so 18 would stand aside. This would give Goku slightly better odds, but how would he fare in this fight? Well, honestly, not very well. But in order to make this assessment, we first need to take a look at some statements that we heard throughout the Cell arc so that we can establish both of their strengths. Now, in the TV special and in the manga, Gohan told Trunks that despite all of his training, he still wasn't as powerful as his father before he died. This was the same Gohan who was a Super Saiyan and had fought the androids before. And that was also right before he rushed into the fight with Android 17. In the manga version of the story, we were told that Android 17 wasn't even using half of his power against Gohan during their prior encounter. He then proceeded to kill him after he stopped holding back. Now, considering that Gohan believed that he could possibly take down 17 with him, we have to assume that this means that he was probably stronger than the amount of 17's power that was used in the prior fight. This would put Gohan somewhere around half as strong as 17 or more. Of course, in the anime version, Gohan fights off both the androids temporarily with just one arm, but the anime version also really overhyped his character just for the sake of drama and a cool fight. After this, future Trunks was also defeated time and time again by the androids. And remember, this was the same future Trunks who easily defeated Frieza and King Cold. However, he was also weaker than Goku when he arrived back from planet Yardrat, which he demonstrated by deflecting all of Trunks' attacks with just one finger. Although, to give him credit, Trunks was stated to be holding back. Now, it's an easy guess that Goku got stronger after this point because he no doubt began training soon after his return. However, because he and the other Earthlings were unaware of the threat to come, none of them would have trained anywhere near as intensely. Goku is already significantly more powerful than everyone else he knew at the time, so the motivation to push himself past his limits wasn't nearly as prevalent. So I would place Goku after the 3 years of training at a level still below Android 17 and 18. We know that their future counterparts are weaker than the main timeline version, likely due to the butterfly effect. But even still, they must have been far enough above Trunks where Goku's power wouldn't have been able to defeat them. Even after sensing Goku's power, Trunks still didn't think he was strong enough to defeat the androids that he knew. So the outcome here wouldn't be favorable for him. Despite that, he might have been able to hold off Android 17 long enough for the other Z fighters to arrive. We know by this point that Vegeta was also a Super Saiyan, which was shown in the History of Trunks special. But despite having surpassed Goku in the main timeline, his original counterpart was still easily killed. So even with the two Super Saiyans and the other Z fighters together, I don't think they would have been able to win. As a result, I could still see a number of them not making it out of this fight alive. However, there is still a chance that Goku could survive this encounter, because again, he does have the instant transmission. So if Goku is getting beaten down so badly that he's about to be killed, it would only make sense for him to teleport away. He would also likely take any surviving warriors with him. Although the number would have to be small because I can't exactly see him taking 10 different trips back and forth here. This is where Goku and the survivors would recuperate and have to come up with a game plan. I think that this would unfold very similarly to how it did in the main timeline, where Goku gathers the family families and brings everyone to Kami's lookout. Unfortunately, with Piccolo dead, Kami would be gone as well, and there would be no guardian there. However, there would still be the hyperbolic time chamber. And just like in the main story, I think this would be Goku's first resort after seeing the power of the androids. Just as he realized in the main timeline, Goku would need to surpass the Super Saiyan wall in order to defeat his enemies. The best place for him to do this would be in the time chamber, due to its intense atmosphere and the fact that he could get 1 year's worth of training in a single day. Something which proves very helpful when two murderous planet-busting cyborgs are searching for him. Now, as for who Goku would enter the chamber with, when it comes to suitable combatants, there's a couple different choices. For instance, it's possible that Vegeta would survive the encounter if Goku helped teleport him away. But that's a big if, because I suspect the first person Goku would save would be Gohan. After all, he is his son, and as we know, Gohan survived the original encounter anyway. The exact means of how are unknown, but in the special chapter that Toyotaro wrote for the Dragon Ball Super manga, we see that he was off with Bulma trying to gather the Dragon Balls when Piccolo was killed. So it's entirely possible that all three of the Saiyans survived. Vegeta would also be the most comparable in power to Goku, perhaps even stronger. But despite that, I suspect that Goku would still want to train with Gohan, because just as in the original story, Goku would have known about Gohan's incredible hidden power and potential. And if Goku died, he would want someone else to be able to defend the world in his place. Additionally, it was Vegeta's goal at this point to kill Goku. So I don't think that Goku would want to train with him and enable his own murder. He's not that stupid. Well, except maybe in Super. Now, analyzing this situation, the biggest obstacle that would pose a problem here is Gohan's power level at the time. Not only was he unable to go Super Saiyan, but he likely didn't train for the 3 years as he did in the main story. As a result, he would be even weaker in this scenario and would hold Goku back even more. But as I explained in my video here, this would only be at first, because with Gohan's incredible hidden potential, which would remain the same, he would quickly scale up to his father and push both fighters to rise far beyond the level of power that Goku would have achieved on his own. Furthermore, unlike in the main story, the two of them would have experienced their friends being killed around them in the fight with the androids, which would give them just as much, if not more, motivation than the story Future Trunks told them. After all, there's a huge difference between experiencing something firsthand and just hearing about it from someone's account. So that direct trauma would likely cause them to push themselves even further than they did in the main timeline. During their training, I suspect that Goku would figure out the other Super Saiyan grades and their weaknesses before settling on the concept of mastering the normal Super Saiyan form. Then at the end of the full year, which they would likely stay for because of the strength disparity, he and Gohan would exit the chamber with their full power Super Saiyan forms like in the original story. Of course, without those 3 additional years of training, the two of them would probably be weaker. However, they would still be far more than powerful enough to defeat the teenage Terminators. The story would then play out with the father and son Super Saiyan team showing up at the site of the android's next attack. It's possible that Goku would fight both of them himself, killing them one by one like Trunks did when he returned to his timeline. But I suspect that Gohan would also want to fight in this case, in order to get revenge for the death of his mentor and friend Piccolo. No, not his father, although I'm sure that some of you were getting ready to comment that. So I can see the fight playing out as a Texas Tornado tag team match, players, with Goku battling 17 and Gohan facing 18, as their fight would take them throughout a ruined city. It would quickly become apparent to the villainous duo that the Saiyans had far surpassed their power, and after showing off their incredible gains, they would dominate their opponents and finally destroy them with a father-son Kamehameha. Toriyama does love his time echoes, after all. With the world once again at peace, I think that Goku would turn his attention to bring back the other Z fighters, by going to King Kai and getting directions to New Namek. Now, we don't exactly know when the Namekian Dragon Balls were upgraded to where they could bring back a group of people at once, but regardless, Goku would find a way to wish back all those who were killed. No doubt beginning with Piccolo. And because in this version of the story, Piccolo never merged with his other half, Kami would remain the Guardian, and the Dragon Balls would likely never be upgraded. So with all that being done and Goku still alive, what happens next? Well, this leads into the threats to come, specifically Babidi and Dabura. Now, when exactly they would arrive is up in the air. In the main timeline, they arrived 7 years after the battle with Cell, but in the future Trunks timeline, they arrived over 15 years later. But for the purposes of this video, let's just say that they would have come at the same time that they did originally. Well, that gives us 7 years of time in between. During that time, I suspect that Vegeta would use all of the tools at his disposal to catch up to Goku and Gohan's power, perhaps using the time chamber himself. With Goku still being alive, the two of them would likely have some kind of encounter during the time skip, a fight which Goku would probably win. So by the time that Babidi arrives here, it's unlikely that Vegeta would still have the urge to turn evil in order to fight him. Much of that choice also came out of desperation because Vegeta knew that Goku would return to heaven at the end of the day. As for Gohan, it's unknown whether or not he would continue training, but going by the Buu saga, it's doubtful. And without his fight against Cell, he would have never unlocked Super Saiyan 2. As a result, by the time that Babidi and Dabura arrive, it would be a far more difficult situation to overcome. The lack of training would add up here, as well as the fact that Goku was still alive during the 7 years rather than training under King Kai with a less limited spiritual body. So Dabura's power would pose a significant challenge. With that said, I wouldn't put it past Goku and perhaps Vegeta to have unlocked Super Saiyan 2 during the time skip. So even if one of them couldn't win on their own against Dabura, I think that if the Saiyans teamed up, they would have been able to overcome him. So combined with the lack of Majin Vegeta, Buu would have never been revived. As a result, the Earth and its people wouldn't have been destroyed, and Fat Buu wouldn't become a Z-fighter. That leads into Dragon Ball Super. Beerus would wake up and seek out the Super Saiyan God. At this point, he would fight Goku, who would lose. Then he would go to the Earth to speak with Vegeta and enjoy the food there. Without Majin Buu, there likely wouldn't be anyone to anger him enough to fight. But despite this, Goku seemed intent on becoming a Super Saiyan God, and I'm really doubtful that Beerus would just give up so easily. Even if he did and he returned back to his world, the Oracle Fish would just say that he was right, and as a result, Beerus would come right back. So going by the movie storyline, they would use the Dragon Balls, figure out the God ritual, and Goku would become a Super Saiyan God. The lack in strength here wouldn't make much of a difference, since Beerus held back massively and Goku would still lose either way. After this, he and Vegeta would form a relationship with Beerus and Whis, and train with them. I suspect that any real difference in power between these versions and the main timeline counterparts would be Hokkai'd here, because Whis would train them to manipulate God Ki, and their powers would rise to be probably around the same level that they were in Resurrection F. This is when Frieza would train for 4 months and gain a massive boost in power, breaking the power scale once again alongside the badass Tagoma, whose power would be stolen by Ginyu for pointless nostalgia. Now in the Super version of the story, Golden Frieza was more powerful than Super Saiyan Blue Goku, and was attempting to drag out the fight to torture him for revenge. This caused Frieza's power to lower until Goku overcame him, all before Toriyama wrote one of the worst scenes in the franchise and had him being taken out by a common ray gun. Then Vegeta would beat down Frieza, only to be killed so that Goku could win. Double sigh. Next, we'd witness the Tournament of Destroyers, which again would probably play out mostly the same way. However, this is when we would encounter a major difference with the Goku Black arc, or lack thereof. Because without Trunks time traveling and creating alternate timelines, Zamasu would never have that true incentive to execute his Zero Mortals plan. He would never encounter Goku or steal his body, and he would also never come to Universe 7 looking for a fight. In turn, Goku would never punch him into being evil, or in the manga version, Zamasu wouldn't get the idea to check out GodTube for information on Goku. Honestly, the lasting effects of this arc were minimal anyway, with the only real differences being that the characters grew stronger, and there are now 2 Zenos. This leads into the Tournament of Power, where Goku would use the Zeno button to visit the Omni King and inquire about the tournament. After some deliberation, Zeno would tell Goku about the tournament and the stipulation, leading to Goku recruiting fighters for the upcoming battle. Now this is where the changes to the prior arcs would have started to add up. because nearly the entire cast would be weaker. Goku and Vegeta wouldn't have gotten any Zenkais or trained as intensely during the Goku Black arc, Piccolo would have never merged with Kami or likely entered the Time Chamber, and Gohan wouldn't have achieved Ultimate in the Buu Saga. Although there is still a chance that he trained under Piccolo after Resurrection F, when he wasn't able to protect his friends and family. And with his plot power potential, which would always be growing, he might not be as far behind as you'd expect. Another problem is that Android 17 and 18 wouldn't be able to fight alongside them on the team, unless of course they brought them back for the fight. This would probably lead to them picking a couple of other different fighters for the team, and this is when Yamcha would finally get his chance to shine. As a result, the ranking of the team going into the fight would be different, with Golden Frieza probably being the strongest after his training in Hell, although Goku could still probably edge him out with the Kaioken, especially if he can use times 20 here. So with this being the case, Universe 7 would have an even harder time in the Tournament of Power, with most of the team being at a greater disadvantage against the other universes. But honestly, because the power scaling was just so awful at the stage and everyone was holding back anyway, I doubt that much would really be that different. Goku and Vegeta would keep growing in power the whole time, Vegeta would get his Super Saiyan Blue evolution form, Jiren would pointlessly hold back instead of eliminating everyone in a microsecond by going full power, and Goku would use Ultra Instinct over and over and over again until eventually Universe 7 wins through the power of friendship as magic. And even without Android 17, I'm guessing that Goku, or whoever is the winner at the end, would probably make the same wish to bring back the other universes. Even if Frieza was the one to win, because after all, knowing how ambitiously evil he is, he'd probably want to rule over the multiverse, and it's kinda hard to do that when all of it's gone. After that, our characters would get into a fight with Roid Rage Broccoli, and then the GOAT villain of the series, and things would likely play out roughly the same way. After the 10 years pass, Goku would fly off to train with Oob, and into a bright new future. The only remaining threat that we know of would be the original timeline Cell, who would still exist at this point and would actually be born a few years later. But considering that even Krillin and Roshi would be able to stomp Imperfect Cell at this point in the story, I doubt that he'd be much of a threat. And without a time machine, he'd be vaporized just as soon as he's discovered. It ain't easy being green. So this has been What If Goku Never Got the Heart Virus? Overall, there would be some big differences, but much of it would also stay the same. Unlike many other what if scenarios, I don't think this would have some kind of horrible doomsday outcome. With Goku alive, our heroes would survive and thrive. And there wouldn't be any alternate timelines or the Goku Black arc. But the ending of that was garbage anyway, so I'm glad it got wiped out of existence. And I also did my best to fix it over in this video you can see here. But with all of this being said, make sure to let me know your own thoughts down below in the comments. Thanks for watching, and make sure to stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching the video this far. I really appreciate it. If you like my content, you could check out my second channel, Laughingstock Cinema, where I talk about live action movies, TV shows, and that much more down below in the description. Thank you all so much, and let's get into the rest of the video. What would happen if the mad scientist Dr. Gero, who went on to create androids even more powerful than Super Saiyans and threaten the entire universe with Perfect Cell, were to, instead of being evil, use his science and his incredible knowledge and genius for good? In this video, we're going to discuss that. So let's first begin with the scenario of Dr. Gero having been good from the start. Let's say that this takes place, I guess, in some alternate universe out there, where for whatever reason there was some kind of change or butterfly effect or whatever have you, where Gero said that I'm not going to be evil. Instead, I'm going to devote this brilliant mind that I was given in order to use it for good in the benefit of humanity. How exactly do you think this would change humanity as we know it by the time of the Dragon Ball story, and also, going forward into the future?
So as you have established, Mike, Gero is a mad genius, an expert in AI, androids, and even even, you could say, biological creatures, human and inhuman. So if he was able to put all that knowledge to the benefit of everyone on the planet, I think that the Dragon Ball world and story would have gone in a much different direction, because the potential that Gero had to change the world is enormous, quite frankly. Let's start with just the very basics. The fact that Gero had such great knowledge about artificial attachments and augmentations, and his knowledge of biology, I think could have helped just on a very basic level the health of humanity. He could have elevated all of mankind to, I guess you could say, a much higher state where he could have made them, much healthier, much more prosperous. But I think it even goes beyond that, because of course one of the core things that Gero did with his technological breakthroughs was making strong fighters. And there also does exist a Earth military in the Dragon Ball world, if one's not mistaken. They appeared most prominently during the fight against Piccolo and Cell. However, they always seemed to be very ineffective against the threats that they were set out to take out. However, instead of Gero putting all that brain power to the Red Ribbon Army, what if he was a scientist for the Earth military? Consider that. Consider the fact that he could build androids that are incredibly strong, incredibly resilient, and depending on what time period you're talking about, the Saiyan threat, Raditz, Vegeta, and Nappa, could be null and void. This is getting a little bit ahead of myself, but Dr. Gero was able to create fighters that were clearly way stronger than Goku at that current time. Now we can verify this because Dr. Gero only had observed Goku up until his fight with Vegeta, and then stopped his surveillance of him when he went to Namek. Now, considering the fact that he did eventually create androids and other things that were way stronger than Goku at that point, we can surmise that generally that Gero probably outpaced Goku in his progress with his creations. So, if we take that into account, threats like Piccolo, and I probably would say even more so the Saiyan threat, could be completely taken care of by the Earth themselves, specifically the Earth military. With Gero on the Earth military side, he could create androids and cyborgs that could take out guys like Piccolo, guys like Raditz, Nappa, and Vegeta without the help of Goku, Krillin, Tien. I mean, with this guy on the Earth side, he could basically make Goku, Krillin, and Tien obsolete. The Earth could defend itself. That's not to say that Goku and the others might be completely taken out of the story, because I think Goku will obviously see an opportunity here in terms of training with people that are stronger than he is. That's something that Goku's always done. But in this scenario, what will happen most likely is that Goku will see all of these strong androids and cyborgs, and undoubtedly he would want to train with them and thus getting stronger himself. I think the gap between the androids and cyborgs and the rest of Goku and the Z fighters will be pretty huge at first. It's pretty hard to speculate on when Goku and Krillin and the rest will catch up, but I speculate that throughout the Saiyan saga, Gero and his creations will be far ahead of Goku and the others, and they might not catch up until perhaps the Cell arc or the androids, or around the time that they're supposed to show up in the main timeline.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I feel like because of this, the themes of the story would probably shift to being even more about biology versus artificial creations, or at least, the enhancements of science versus natural power, much like, some of the themes that were discussed in the Cell Saga and even the Red Ribbon Army arc originally, when Goku was fighting against androids like Major Metallotron, and also, of course, Ader, Android 8. And so the fact of the matter is that the pure strength of the cyborgs would be pretty difficult for even most of the Z fighters to overcome, because when we look at just how powerful even Android 8 was compared to normal humans, and then when we compare even Android 17 and 18 later in the story, when they're introduced, and just how incredibly powerful they were, as you said, being way more powerful than Goku with his Kaioken against Vegeta, but even more so, as I talked about in this video you can see in the top right corner, Dr. Gero was able to create androids more powerful than Frieza and the Super Saiyans at the time, more powerful than Goku, Vegeta, and future Trunks. And they were so powerful they annihilated upgrade the Z Fighters in the future and completely terrorize them, forcing Bulma to create time travel just to be able to combat them. So when we look at 17 and 18 individually, when we're discussing this, we've never really heard that they were super incredibly powerful, gifted children at the time. They might have just been regular, normal kids, or maybe they didn't really have the power outward, but they had a lot of potential at the time. So you think about just how powerful he was able to make androids 17 and 18, and then you could think about applying that to pretty much any other human at the time, especially humans like a Krillin or like a Yamcha or Tien or something, who have this incredible latent potential within them, and just how much more powerful he could have actually made them, and how even random people off the street, essentially these NPC characters almost that we see in the background of Dragon Ball, could theoretically be competing with Goku or far more powerful than him if Gero were to take his science and apply it to the population at large, essentially speeding up the whole transhumanist movement significantly to where, people on Earth become these incredible androids, or these incredible cyborgs rather, to use the terminology that really makes the most sense. But even if we assume that pretty much everything played out the same way that it would have up until the Red Ribbon Army, that Gero spent most of his life either working for evil or was coerced into working for the Red Ribbon Army, we don't really know how that started in the first place or how he got into the idea of world domination from his backstory. But if we assume that everything went the same, and that after the destruction of the Red Ribbon Army, maybe Gero looked upon his work and he realized that working for evil ultimately wouldn't pay off, and he decided instead to have a change of heart and maybe help Goku and friends, this would also take the story in a wildly different direction, because not only could he supply them perhaps with things like powerful armor, or maybe he could give them a Z Fighter android that can, join Goku's group of friends, maybe he could continue to upgrade Android 8, for example, so that he could fight alongside Goku and friends, or actually, doing something other than just hanging out in Jingle Village with Sinnoh for the rest of his life. The thing is that, not only could he do that, but he could also perhaps upgrade the Z Fighters, such as, for instance, the human fighters who generally tended to lag behind Goku, like for example Krillin, Tien, and especially Yamcha and Chaozu. If we count Chaozu as a human, I don't really know what he's supposed to be in universe.
Good point.
So just how big of an influence and an impact would Gero have upon Goku and friends if he were to start aiding them in their journey and giving them not only, perhaps someone else to fight alongside them in another android, but also perhaps augmenting and upgrading them as well with his technology?
Well, I think you've already mentioned a couple of those things. Obviously, it would only greatly enhance Goku and the rest to take care of the threats they're supposed to take care of. If after the Red Ribbon Army, Gero joins, I don't know, maybe Bulma or at Capsule Corp, which is probably the most likely scenario. Dr. Brief is there, and that's where all the technological stuff should be happening. I would almost imagine that perhaps even Bulma, somebody who doesn't really get involved in the conflict side of things, she might. Now, it's a big might because although her personality doesn't seem to be very much inclined to it, but she never had an option to either because she was not capable. But with Gero there is the possibility, there is the chance that she could have an opportunity to join these conflicts and actually help out in meaningful ways. That's also another thing that I think is very likely, considering the fact that she'll be in close proximity to Gero if he does decide to join the good guys, because I would imagine he'd be near Capsule Corp. Of course, there's all the benefit that he could supply to Goku himself. Now, Goku's always somebody who wants to gain strength through his own means, but if there's a real dire situation, Goku is not above taking a quick and fast way to get stronger in order to deal with a certain threat. A perfect case for this is when Piccolo was causing tyranny and lording over the entire Earth, Goku seeked out the Super Divine Water, something that will make Goku much stronger than he had to be because he had already lost in a fight to Piccolo. However, in a scenario where Dr. Gero is around, perhaps there's another option for Goku. Instead of going to Korin's tower to take the water, he might go to Capsule Corp because Bulma, Gero, and Brief might have some, I don't know, maybe augmentations or something that they might provide Goku in order for him to face Piccolo. In the main story, because we don't get introduced to Gero much later in the story, we don't know when Gero finally discovered the technology to make cyborgs with infinite energy. But even as a good guy, undoubtedly, he will have made this discovery. And at this point, Goku will have access to, if he wanted to, this ability of infinite energy, which, if you keep in mind, during Goku's fights, one major theme that runs through them is that Goku does maybe put up a good fight in a lot of these, but you know, he doesn't have infinite endurance. He gets tired. He has to always conserve. That's another theme that's throughout Goku's fights, is him conserving energy and trying to make him last throughout the fight. That is a handicap that he will no longer have. If this discovery is made before the trip to Namek and before the fight with Frieza, perhaps we'll be dealing with a Goku during the Frieza fight that has infinite energy. And I would imagine that even though Goku, if he is as strong as he was in the main story, the way it happened, he might build up a much better fight before turning into a Super Saiyan with infinite energy than he did in the actual fight, the way it happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing is that you have to wonder, just like combining that infinite energy and the augmentation of the different kind of things that Dr. Gero would be able to do to Goku's body, not only with his cybernetic enhancements, but also his incredible knowledge of gene splicing and other kind of science in that area that he used to develop Cell. If he were to use that kind of technology to bring out not only Goku's deeper potential, but also like his Zenkai boosts to their maximum, because combine infinite energy with these big Zenkai boosts, and who knows, maybe Goku would be able to defeat Frieza without ever becoming a Super Saiyan in the first place. You know, we think about these things kind of how they would play out in the story traditionally, but when you think about it, I mean, they might make these Saiyan characters so OP, especially if Goku still continues to spare people like Piccolo and Vegeta and some of these other people along the way, that like, imagine, you know, an android or a cyborg rather with Namekian biology or with the Saiyan biology, and they're getting these ridiculous Zenkai boosts. So I don't really know if it would necessarily hamper Goku from becoming a Super Saiyan or these other characters, because they wouldn't have as much of the desperation and the need to do so, but eventually they might run into characters so powerful that are such a wall or an obstacle that they have to overcome that ultimately they would require, you know, their further forms. And who knows, maybe Super Saiyan might be even more powerful or even different with how it affects the body, becoming a Super Saiyan with those android enhancements, and maybe they wouldn't even have to bother with things like full power Super Saiyan or grade 4 Super Saiyan, because, well, why conserve stamina if we already have infinite stamina to begin with?
That's a very good point. I would imagine that if you basically stack infinite energy with Super Saiyan, it would probably be something like full power Super Saiyan, except right from the very beginning, because if you remember, Goku and Gohan had to train themselves to be in a state where they basically, it was natural and they weren't really wasting energy. But I mean, with infinite energy, it pretty much would be like something like that, maybe even better, but at least the same thing as full power Super Saiyan right from the very start, right from the beginning. And basically that's how every transformation would be from there forward. So something like Super Saiyan 3, one of the most infamous weaknesses of it was its energy consumption. Well, if Goku has the augmentations that Gero would gave 17 and 18, theoretically he wouldn't even have that weakness anymore.
Yeah. When he goes Super Saiyan 3, it'd basically be like he mastered it from the beginning. So if he had to fight someone like Kid Buu or something like that, and at this point in time he'd be so powerful he might even be able to fight against Gohan and characters like that, the question becomes, would he even really have to use a technique like the Spirit Bomb to beat him? Or would he just be able to spam full power Kamehamehas the entire time and never have an issue with that? Another thing too that could be really helpful against enemies, especially ones who could sense energy, is the fact that they might be able to give not only the humans but also the Saiyans and others the ability to fight with maybe the same kind of augmented pure energy that the androids use, so that nobody would be able to even sense them when they're fighting. So this means that Goku and the others would be so powerful and basically undetectable by these people that they're fighting, to where they would just be able to fight them in a way to where it would be much harder for their enemies to fight back because they can't even sense them at the time. So there's so many great applications that Dr. Gero's science would be able to have on the Z fighters themselves, as well as we mentioned earlier, with humanity as a whole. Because not only would the Z fighters probably be the same ones that Goku already made friends with along the way, but I mean, just imagine how many more members of that team could be added. I mean, maybe we could even see an upgraded Mr. Satan Saiyan, who really is one of the most powerful fighters on Earth.
Well, yeah, I mean, considering how powerful Gero can make seemingly normal humans into, he could literally make Mr. Satan stronger than Frieza. And if he does that before Frieza shows up in the story, I mean, forget Goku or Vegeta or Trunks, Mr. Satan can beat Frieza, at that point.
Maybe him beating up Beerus wouldn't actually be fake at that point.
Well, I guess that's a whole other can of worms. Because by the time you get to the Buu saga, it does seem that the limitations of Gero's, I don't know, you could say abilities or technological abilities start to hit a cap. So perhaps by the time Buu shows up, maybe Mr. Satan, if he didn't get any stronger, which if you include Super, we learn that someone like Android 17 got much insanely powerful. So maybe someone like Mr. Satan potentially could, if you include Super, could take on someone like Buu.
Well, Mr. Satan would have to fight a bunch of poachers on an island for 10 years to get as powerful as a Super Saiyan Blue.
You're absolutely correct. And considering the fact that Mr. Satan probably wouldn't go under that very specific training, even though he would be very powerful and probably more powerful than a Super Saiyan, you'd have to be more powerful than a Super Saiyan to beat someone like Majin Buu. So perhaps Mr. Satan reaches his limit or max around the Buu saga.
Another thing is that it's really Goku and his friend group that would really be training anywhere near as intensely as, some of these fighters probably would be, because when we take a look at, for example, Frieza's forces, most of them were kind of just relying on their natural mutant types of power. They didn't really train intensely under gravity or under martial arts masters and stuff like the people on Earth did. So you have to wonder if Mr. Satan would kind of be complacent, as well as many of the other most powerful cyborg humans, with their own incredible power given to them, that they wouldn't really even try and train in martial arts, and they wouldn't try and train their mind, body, and spirit simultaneously. So it could be that in terms of technique and, things like that, maybe Goku and his friends could still kind of edge them out or, eventually surpass them as still being the prominent focus. But ultimately, those humans who do will benefit significantly more than those who don't.
Absolutely. Frieza was supposedly the most powerful guy in the entire universe as far as non-deities, non-weird beings are concerned, basically. And he was, for the most part, and Gero on Earth could create beings more powerful than him. So this is the kind of scale we're talking about here,
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about these really powerful threats, it does lead into really the only real negative, I suppose, that we could see from this situation, which is the possibility of something like the Terminator or X-Men Days of Future Past, or many of these other stories happening in which these incredibly powerful artificial intelligence and other technological terrors basically rise to power and try and destroy humanity and take over the world or even the universe. As we saw in the Cell Saga, for instance, the androids didn't really listen to Dr. Gero very well, whether it be the ones that he had created from scratch, like Android 16, or a number of other androids along the way, and also, of course, 17 and 18, who, despite all their programming, they still eventually killed him and didn't listen to his orders. So it does make you wonder if maybe there would be a kind of hint of irony here in the story, of Dr. Gero using his abilities for good, but ultimately he still ends up creating a massive threat for the Z fighters in the entire universe as a whole, as he tries to create something maybe kind of like what we saw in Age of Ultron in the Marvel movies, where he tries to create something for the betterment of mankind, maybe to help defend the Earth or the universe, and ultimately that creature decides, well, I'm better than all of these things, so I'm gonna try and take them over or wipe them out because the threat is humanity itself. So I think that would be certainly an interesting direction that the story could take. But overall, I think that we've discussed in this video that Dr. Gero would play a very big role in reshaping the story and the Earth and really the entire Dragon Ball world as we know it, if he were to, instead of using his science for evil, use it for good. And things would never really be the same again. Make sure to subscribe and enable all notifications so you can stay up to date with all of my videos. Thanks for watching, and make sure to stick around because there's a lot more to come in the future. Hey guys, it's Mike here, and have you ever wondered the question of what if Dr. Gero rebuilt King Cold and Frieza? No? Well, I don't care because I'm going to be talking about it in this video, in which I'm going to be discussing the topic I literally just said. I mean, pay attention. But anyway, let's get into that topic and that subject right now in this what if scenario that I'm doing completely off the top of my head. Ow. Anyway, let's get into that discussion because as we saw with King Cold when he had Frieza rebuilt by the forces in the Frieza military, which were controlled exclusively by, guess what, Frieza, we found out that he had been built as Mecha Frieza, stronger than he even was when he fought Goku as a Super Saiyan on Namek. Now, immediately after that, King Cold and Frieza took off to the Earth in order to get revenge upon Son Goku, who was returning from Yardrat, where he had undergone special training. That would eventually be expanded upon significantly further in the Dragon Ball Super manga, depending upon if you count that as the same canon. I talked about another video involving that up here, over here actually, because my camera is mirrored apparently. Anyway, with that being said, they came to the Earth, and in the original timeline, and in the future Trunks timeline, they were both obliterated by Goku. However, in the main timeline and the unseen timeline, and then a bunch of other timelines they would add later on, future Trunks showed up and killed King Cold and Frieza pretty mercilessly. It was pretty awesome, one of the best scenes, and definitely one of the best appearances, first appearances that is, of any character in the Dragon Ball franchise, especially in the Dragon Ball Z section of the manga and the anime. And at that point, what happened is, well, they were obliterated. Many years later, Frieza would be brought back, and of course, he would be resurrected in his natural bioorganic form. However, with that being said, proceeding right after the eventual return of Trunks was the Android arc, the arc in which we found out about Dr. Gero, the evil mastermind who is hiding in the shadows behind the Red Ribbon Army and who had also created all of their androids, of course ignoring Dr. Flap and Frappe from the Dragon Ball anime filler. Now, during that time, we found out that Dr. Gero was an amazing scientist when it came to bioengineering, gene splicing, robotics, and everything else along those lines. He was above and beyond almost anyone else in the franchise, with, the potential exception of Bulma. After all, she did create time travel that let Trunks go back in time, creating a bunch of different timelines in the process, and then, of course, helping to inevitably defeat Dr. Gero's mechanical machinations. But with that being said, what ended up happening was Dr. Gero was able to turn himself and also create another robot in 19 that were able to be so powerful they could defeat Frieza even in his Mecha Frieza form. The same thing was the case for Android 17 and 18. They were just two kids, two teenagers perhaps, when they were kidnapped by him, experimented on, and primarily using organic components were able to be modified to being more powerful than Super Saiyans, than Frieza, and of course 1920 himself. They were even significantly more powerful than Goku, Vegeta, Gohan, a lot of these characters after they had trained for 3 years, knowing that they were going to face these guys, and they still wrecked them in the main timeline and literally killed them in the future Trunks and the history of Trunks timeline. That's actually the same thing. I should probably get my terms right every now and then. In the original timeline and of course the future Trunks one. So with that in mind, and with the potential that we've seen Frieza demonstrate throughout the course of the series, with the combination of different new forms that he's acquired since his return in Dragon Ball Z Resurrection F, going into the Dragon Ball Super era, and of course just how significantly powerful he became with just 4 months of training. 4 months of training during the period of time in which he was able to surpass every single character in Dragon Ball Z by far, even including Majin Buu, who had absorbed characters who had already surpassed everyone, including Frieza at that point. He could stomp him, Vegito, Gogeta from the movies, and just, throw in Broly, Janemba, and a lot of those other popular characters with one finger, probably with 1% of his power in his Golden Frieza form. So, just seeing how powerful he became after he came back and was arguably a little bit weaker after his time in Hell, which is implied in the original movie and in the manga variation of it, he went from being that to being more powerful than Super Saiyan Blue Goku. So imagine just how powerful he could have become as Mecha Frieza if he was rebuilt by Dr. Gero.
I mean, let's just take a look at Cell, for example. Cell is a perfect example of a character who had been created using all of the previous villains and even heroes simultaneously in one organic being, in one bio-android who became so powerful that even after a year of training with his son, who had greater potential than himself in the time chamber, Goku was not able to defeat Cell and was significantly outclassed by him. The very same Goku who defeated Frieza on Namek, and who was significantly more powerful, especially by that point in the series, than Frieza and King Cold combined. So the point of the matter is that Cell actually contained some of Frieza's cells within him, some of King Cold's cells as well, which I'll be getting into shortly. And those are two of the most powerful, naturally strong beings there are, especially considering the fact that we were told specifically by Frieza that he had never trained in his life up until the point of Resurrection F. And of course, when we take that into account, we do have to wonder how literal he's being with the word training. Some people figure that he never even lifted a finger, but you see all the techniques he uses, you see the ability to use the transformations that he figured out over time on his own for suppression purposes, and you hear about how King Cold had kind of hit him around at points, so you have to wonder how much of that counts as real training, but nonetheless he never truly pushed himself anywhere near his limits at that time. And the same really could be said for Cell, who we saw so much of their DNA and genes within. Inherently, that is something that ultimately led to him being so powerful, and we can only imagine how powerful he could have become as well if he had trained. I mean, just look at Cell Max from the new Dragon Ball Super superhero movie. Definitely check that one out. I've talked a little bit about that on my channel in the past, which you could also see again up here. And during that period of time, Josh from Dragon Ball Nation, let's shout him out too, and I went super in depth into just how much we loved that movie. But nonetheless, what I would say with regard to Frieza is, we saw how strong he was as Mecha Frieza, but he probably would have been significantly, vastly more powerful if he had come back with Dr. Gero's enhancements instead. Whether or not somehow King Cold got in contact with Dr. Gero and contracted him out in order for him to come to Frieza's forces, or when they went to the Earth, instead just looking for the ultimate in robotics. Maybe they had scout ships sent to the Earth, for example, in ahead of time, like we saw in Resurrection F, scouting Goku's main planet. Maybe Frieza was a little bit more insightful and had more foresight this time when, he actually overheard the things happening on Earth. Okay, I'm going to Namek. You guys go over there and check things out. Kind of like a little way of making it a little bit more logical that they would somehow know who Dr. Gero was, and even know anything about the Earth and its technology at the time. But realistically, we could even have it take place after King Cold and Frieza were defeated by Goku or Trunks. In the case of Trunks, that would have been a little bit harder because of the fact that, after all, Trunks did vaporize both of them and destroy their ship. But as we saw, Dr. Gero was able to grow and basically clone through gene engineering the character known as Cell. He was able to completely create him in a lab. So what's to say that Dr. Gero couldn't have regrown Frieza or King Cold instead? Or maybe, in the original variation where Goku killed King Cold and Frieza, maybe he left a lot more of their bodies intact, and thus they both could have been more like Mecha Frieza at that point. And I think that if Dr. Gero got his hands on these incredibly powerful beings, they would have been that much more powerful. Because, of course, as we saw with 17 and 18, for all we know, they were just kids that had normal human potential that was taken beyond anything that they could possibly comprehend, or anything that Goku and Vegeta could have even a few years before. And so when it comes down to that, imagine if he had that potential of Frieza and King Cold on display. They would have been so powerful that, maybe they'd even be rivaling Dragon Ball Super characters at this point. I mean, using the Dragon Ball Super logic, they'd probably be even more powerful, all the way back in the Cell Saga, and then everyone would have definitely been screwed, because this is the thing. As we saw with Dr. Gero, when he tried to program 17 and 18, they still refused to obey him, because ultimately they weren't robots that he viewed as perfect and not failed like Android 19. They were not built from scratch and basically there to do his beck and call. Ultimately, he could not override their ability of self-individualization, of self-actualization, of where they wanted to do what it was they wanted through. As a result, as we know it, free will. So he couldn't overtake that, he couldn't override that, and ultimately it led to his death in every timeline, as the androids ultimately would get free, kill him, and then in turn go about their rampage. So the exact same thing would no doubt happen with regard to Frieza and King Cold. I mean, he could rebuild them. Maybe they would be, pleading with him along the way, telling him, oh, we'll definitely help you. We'll defeat Goku for you. We'll do this. We'll do that. But they wouldn't realize, or, Dr. Gero probably wouldn't realize that if at the end of the day they got their way and they got rebuilt or taken to an even stronger degree with their clones, then they would be able to easily defeat and destroy this man, and then in turn nobody would really be able to stop them. I mean, you could throw Goku and Gohan in the hyperbolic time chamber, but considering the potential of Frieza, it would really not make a difference. You can put them in for 10 days, they'd probably come out and still get wrecked as far as we know. And maybe not with Gohan, especially with Gohan Beast and all this stuff that we see nowadays in Dragon Ball Super. Maybe that would give them a little run for their money, but who knows at that point. We know that they would never be able to stay in there the whole time anyway, because of the fact that, the door would disappear. So unless they decide to scream their way out, and unless somehow Mr. Popo kept jumping in there and giving them food, that wouldn't have really worked out too well either. So realistically, if Frieza and King Cold got rebuilt, it would ultimately lead to the horrible outcome for everyone, in which they would destroy Goku and all of his friends, because they would never really stand a chance. I mean, as we said, even if we give them the most conservative possible increase and just say that they were a little bit stronger than, the Android 17 and 18, I doubt that they would have spared any of the Z fighters had they fought them. They would just wipe them out. The same thing would be the case for, let's give them a slightly less conservative increase if they're more powerful than Perfect Cell. I mean, how many more times powerful was Perfect Cell than, or Super Perfect Cell than Perfect Cell in this case? There wasn't really that gigantic of a difference between him and Super Saiyan 2 Teen Gohan, as people like to call him, adolescent Gohan, or really Gohan when he first taps into his hidden potential along with Super Saiyan 2 at will. So if Frieza and King Cold were relative in terms of power, they'd be able to wreck everyone in the Cell Saga, and, the Earth would be doomed. They would just blow it up for fun at that point, and it would be a very negative outcome for everyone as a result. So when it comes down to that, I think that would be the outcome overall. And with that being said about the power, we've often wondered just who is really more powerful between Frieza and King Cold. There are different variations of this idea in the anime and the manga. In Dragon Ball Z Kai, they flat out just state that King Cold was more powerful than Frieza, but then they still have the little caveat of saying that, if Frieza revved up his power, he would get even more significantly stronger. So the thing is, too, there's the whole question of could Frieza and King Cold equally transform in terms of the same number of transformations? Was King Cold already as maximum in just like a different state that he kind of preferred to stay in, like a first or second form? The first possibly meaning that he's way older, and then, of course, just grew taller, whereas Frieza, as we know, is kind of the runt of the litter in that case, especially if we include his non-canon brother Cooler. So, with that being said, I talked about that in yet another video you could see all the way up here because I keep pointing in the wrong direction. But nonetheless, what I would say there is that there is a chance that King Cold could be even more powerful than Frieza in this case, especially if he could amplify his power significantly higher than what we actually saw. And I guess that both Trunks and even Goku, for some reason, wouldn't allow him to transform. But like I said, I talked about that in yet another video, which I'm definitely running out of cards at this point. The greatest unseen fight in Dragon Ball Z, or something along those lines. You guys have seen it, had a lot of views. So nonetheless, what I would say is that this would be a very interesting scenario that we could see. It would be a very interesting outcome for the story. But when we do get into some of the minutiae of Dragon Ball Super, the legs of this and really many other what ifs kind of get cut off from under them in a sense, because when it comes time to everything involving the Zenos, we know that at some point come the Tournament of Power, the Zenos were looking to erase many of the universes because they felt like the mortal levels were simply too low. And furthermore, they also felt that, they just had too many universes to play around with, essentially, And so as a result, they were going to wipe out Universe 7. So if Frieza and King Cold kind of rose to prominence even higher, were more powerful than the gods in their universe at that point, maybe even eventually surpassing Beerus, the fact of the matter is that they would kind of probably go about that direction too. There's a chance the mortal levels would go a lot lower if Frieza and King Cold decide to inhabit some of the feelings that the androids had toward the other races and just started to obliterate all of them too. Maybe Dr. Gero made them a little more evil and more maniacal and more destructive and devastating. So as a result, hey, go out there and have some fun, Frieza and King Cold. Oh no, the entire universe is already blown away. That could very well be something that would end up happening too. So it could end up being significantly worse than really anyone had possibly imagined. In terms of their power, doing power scaling again, they could be very much comparable or competitive with some of the higher tier characters in Dragon Ball Super, or, knowing Dragon Ball Super's logic. Gohan sneezes and he becomes more powerful than Ultra Instinct. So you never know with Frieza. He just shows up and he has a brand new form. Now I'm Android Black Frieza or something like that. It's kind of like a meta cooler. And he also has 1,000 of him for some reason. Maybe he figures out how to use Dr. Gero's cloning. We have a whole army of Black Friezas, with some android components in there. That doesn't sound horrifying or like the thing from Goku's worst nightmares at all. Definitely. But with that being said, this was What If King Cold and Frieza were rebuilt by Dr. Gero, or whichever variation I use in the title. Depends on how clickable it is and what YouTube wants to promote. Let me know your own thoughts down below in the comments. It's been a little while since I did Dragon Ball Z What If and Dragon Ball Super 1 in a sense, so go down below, let me know what you think would happen, and, check out my other videos on my channel. Talk to you later. Hey guys, it's Mike here, and in this video, I'm going to be discussing another hypothetical versus battle that would have occurred during the Cell Saga of Dragon Ball Z, and more specifically after the main villain was first introduced back in Ginger Town, when he was absorbing the entire city. This would be a fight between Imperfect Cell and Super Saiyan Vegeta before he went into the hyperbolic time chamber, and the question of who exactly would have actually been able to win if that hypothetical battle went down, as opposed to what occurred in the original story with Vegeta instead replacing Piccolo. So let's be getting into that right now. So let's begin with the power of the Saiyan Prince Vegeta right now. After he had achieved the Super Saiyan transformation, which is something that he was striving for since well before even Goku got it. Something that he wanted to achieve all throughout the time on Namek, and he was finally able to do so, and showed it off when he showed up in order to fight against Android 19. Now, in terms of the power of Vegeta on display, we have to do it comparatively against 19, because after the death of Frieza, there is no other power level that's indicated to us, really ever since Namek, unless you count the 5 that they scanned for Trunks and the Kili units that they use in the Buu Saga. But in terms of the power of 19, he actually was even stronger than before, as you could see right here, Dr. Gero, or Gero in the Japanese, says, "Greedy pig, you've already raised your maximum power by draining the energy of Son Goku, and yet you ask me for more, so be it. But in exchange, I alone will take the remaining 4. And so this is where we get an indication of just how powerful 19 is. Not only was he powerful enough to take a beating from a weakened Super Saiyan Goku who was suffering from the effects of the heart virus, but also he drained his energy, so he's even stronger now. This is what leads to Vegeta powering up to Super Saiyan against him, and then basically stomping him during the course of their fight. Android 19 punches him. Vegeta, in the English dub, he's like, that was for free if I remember correctly, but in this one, I suppose that's the most I could expect, you know. He's really hyped himself up at this moment. He's been waiting years for this, and he's finally going to show off how awesome he is, basically. In which he kicks him right through. This is one of the things I love in this arc, especially where Toriyama, shows characters getting hit so hard that you could actually see the imprint of the foot or the fist or whatever, they're being hit with, kind of like what we saw with Android 17 and Piccolo during their fight. Now, as we see right here too, which I even mentioned before, Vegeta did go on to stomp Android 19 and showing off just how much more powerful he was than this powered up already android, which in turn led to him actually letting himself have his energy be absorbed and using this opportunity to rip off the arms, the hands of Android 19, flying up in the air, and with the remaining energy, which, wasn't really actually that much considering what we see next, he fires his Big Bang attack directly at 19, blowing him up, and then after this, we see that Vegeta actually has to transform back into his base. He's so exhausted, and he even tells Android 20 this as a means of bluffing him. Android 19, or Android 20 in this case, who is Dr. Gero, doesn't take the bait, and so he actually runs away, even though, as Piccolo points out momentarily, Vegeta really did lose quite a bit of strength. He drew the fight out intentionally just so he could confirm that the artificial humans drain energy through their palms. If number 20 had called his bluff, Vegeta would have certainly lost. He acted as if it were nothing at all. He truly is a genius when it comes to the battlefield. It's possible that he's even surpassed Goku. And this is something that's mentioned a number of times during this particular early section of the arc, leading up to the fight with the androids, which is something that you could actually see me discuss more in depth in a video in the top right corner, why Super Saiyan Vegeta was actually stronger than Super Saiyan Goku during this very point. I also discussed another video you could see in the top right corner, who would have actually won between the two before they went into the hyperbolic time chamber. That's another what if fight that I've done in the past. Now eventually we see Vegeta tested, pushed to his limits, and also beaten down during his fight against Android 18. And as we could see at first, neither one of them is actually going full power. As Vegeta says after he blasts the truck driver right here, rest in peace, I don't think he ever even got a wish back, Android 18 says, "You haven't been giving me your best." And Vegeta says, "Of course I haven't. If I were to fight you seriously, I doubt the planet could handle it." In different translations, he would easily blow away the planet if he really went all out, which is kind of the overall point that he's making. And so Android 18 also confirms that she was holding back the whole time as well, and so she decides to go all out according to her own words, where she immediately takes the attack to Vegeta, dealing damage to him, going through his key barrier and force field and bloodying him up with that headbutt, and then the two of them begin to fight. 18 continues to have the advantage, however Vegeta doesn't exactly go down immediately. He bounces off rocks, he jumps and headbutts her himself, double axe handles her into a mountain, blasts her, and actually in the process of doing this, he is able to damage her clothing, as you can see, going through her force field as well, and actually doing more damage overall considering what we could see the visible damage comparative to what Vegeta got, even though she isn't really drawing blood too much right now. He does say, though, that she isn't actually phased, and at this point, Android 18 is surprised by the power of Vegeta, which should really go to show that despite the fact that Android 18 is definitely the more powerful of the two here, Vegeta still is actually giving her somewhat of a fight. We don't really know what percentage of her power he is, but it really is made to be a bigger deal that Vegeta is losing stamina, as we mentioned right here. Vegeta's going to get himself killed. Take a closer look. The artificial human is gradually wearing him down. The enemy's power is seemingly infinite, but Vegeta's stamina is taking a hit with every move he makes. This is when we see 18 gets even more of the advantage. Vegeta is getting knocked back, and then eventually he can't take it anymore and gets his left arm broken, which is what leads to Trunks jumping in and everything just kind of going downhill immediately, where the androids just start to wreck everyone, including Piccolo, who I'll be getting into momentarily. And here's another example of somebody getting punched and it expanding outward. Piccolo probably doesn't have stretchy body like Stretch Armstrong or something like that. But either way, we see that Vegeta, he got wrecked and he got left laying after Android 18 broke his second arm as well, leaving him powered back down and reverting back to his normal form. So again, I think that the mention that Piccolo makes down here of the fact that the androids have infinite energy, and that's the main reason why Vegeta is going to lose because she's wearing him down, is a indicator that Vegeta is not vastly below Android 18 in terms of being many times weaker or something like that. After all, the thing is that if she was many times stronger, and that's the reason why she breaks his arm and ultimately defeats him, then as a result, that wouldn't have even been a thing worth making mention of, because Android 18 simply could have one-shot Vegeta or put him down without ever having to wear him down in the first place. And even though, according to what Android 18 says herself, that she isn't going to hold back and she's going to go all out against Vegeta, which he starts to do, Vegeta is still able to get in some shots against her and fire an attack that gets through her barrier enough to damage her clothing, even though it doesn't do any serious damage. So again, I think that means that Vegeta wasn't many times weaker or vastly weaker than her, depending upon, what you view as vast in this franchise, because some people think it's like 1 trillion times, whereas others, it's about 10%. It depends on how you actually look at the anime and manga power scaling. But either way, it's pretty clear that Vegeta, despite being the most powerful fighter here at the time that isn't evil, or at least super evil, or at least antagonistically evil at this point in time, I suppose, until afterward when he plans to kill Goku and then he would be a villain again. He still isn't at the level of androids 18 or 17. However, a character that does become at the level is Piccolo. And this is after he goes and merges with Kami and becomes, once again, the nameless Namekian, which is what leads to him, in turn, going on to fight Cell, as we see the introduction of the second fighter in this battle. And this is where we get Imperfect Cell's initial power, or at least the power after he absorbs everyone within Ginger Town, because we never truly get to see just how powerful Cell is when he is not after absorbing a bunch of people. Even when he attacks Trunks in the future, this is still after he'd absorbed people for years in the wastelands of the future before he showed up to kill Trunks when he was going to go back in time to warn everyone, even though it did say that he would have actually gone back in time a year before he initially did, which would have created an entirely new timeline and then in turn, ruined everything. So I don't know what the heck he was thinking. The fact of the matter is, we get to see what both Piccolo and Cell are capable of after Cell powers up during the midst of their conversation, and so too does Piccolo, which is where Piccolo actually tells Cell that he done goofed, because he says, the fact that you dealt with all the residents in this town works out quite nicely in my favor. This way, I'm free to go all out. So Piccolo doesn't really have to worry about collateral damage and proceeds to blast Cell pretty close to his face. I would say right in the face, but at least 1 meter or 2 away from him for my metric system fans out there. And at this point, we're told by Android 16 that one of them has enough power to rival Android 17 and 18. Of course, that is going to be a reference to Piccolo because we do see him go on to fight against Android 17 later on in the arc, and one of the best fights in the entire franchise. However, the fact that he is saying that only one of them has the power to rival these two should showcase that Cell at this point is weaker than the androids, which only makes sense because he does go on to absorb even more people after escaping at the end of this fight. But either way, what occurs is that Piccolo at first seems to have the advantage over Cell up until what ends up happening, which is that Cell surprises Piccolo by using the Kamehameha against him, which in turn Piccolo jumps out of the way of. Cell jumps out from behind him in the midst of the smoke and the mushroom cloud that he caused, and then what happens? Well, Cell absorbs Piccolo's left arm. Always the left arm, isn't it, Toriyama? Which is actually something that we go to find out is all a ploy on Piccolo's behalf, because of course, despite despite the fact that Cell seems to have either forgotten or just, didn't realize that this version of Piccolo could regenerate, he is able to and does it right here. However, when the ploy actually began here is kind of up in the air. Ironically, as you can see, they are actually up in the air. Did it begin before he allowed Cell to grab him and then go to absorb him? Or did it only begin after he escaped and got back down on the ground and then started to feign that he no longer had the ability to maintain his balance, which makes quick movements more difficult, and by admitting this, looks like Cell is won. I feel like that's probably where Piccolo started to kind of improvise here, because despite the fact that Piccolo did have his arm absorbed by Cell, which in turn probably would have caused some kind of weakening of his overall energy, because it's the bioextract and energy that Cell is in turn absorbing from him. We can even see him huffing and puffing a little bit right here. The fact of the matter is that Cell seems to have genuinely caught Piccolo off guard right here, whether it's because of the fact that he was really surprised by the fact that Cell was firing a yellow Kamehameha. I don't know why they always color it yellow in the manga, in the full color manga, but nonetheless they did. And it looks like he jumped out and was able to actually get the advantage over Piccolo here. We see that Piccolo is sweating from this whole encounter. That's usually a sign that it's kind of a oh no moment and things are actually getting real. And Piccolo doesn't immediately break free of this either. He still does have his arm drained in the process. So I kind of feel like it's more that Piccolo kind of came up with this whole thing on the fly after he saw the situation they were in, and Cell seemed to believe that he had won. But nonetheless, I think that it still is a showcase of Cell's power and speed that he was able to even temporarily catch this powerful Piccolo off guard. And this is also where Cell explains some of the other techniques he has the ability to do, such as the Genki Dama or the Spirit Bomb that he thinks he could do. I believe in the anime they also have Cell say that he could possibly do the Kaioken, even though we never once see him do it, except perhaps if you want to say that he was using an invisible one, which again, there's literally no proof to ever say that. But nonetheless, the fact of the matter is that this is where Cell takes the opportunity to escape. Now, as Cell is running away, we do get a really interesting scene where Cell is plotting about how he's going to absorb another city until he senses Vegeta and goes and hides behind a tree. Now, Vegeta, when he's flying by, Cell is noticing his power, and he's saying, "Vegeta, why is he here? He hasn't gotten himself killed by 17 or 18 yet? What's more, his power far exceeds what I expected from him. It would be wise to speed up the process." So the fact of the matter is that Cell is very cautious of Vegeta sensing his power right here, and at the same time is saying that he needs to speed up the process of absorbing another city, which seems to be implying that Vegeta here is even more powerful than Cell theoretically. However, with that being said, Vegeta on his way here also says something himself, which is, "One of the two ridiculously high battle powers I've been sensing has suddenly disappeared, but the second one is still there dead ahead. It couldn't be number 17 or any of the artificial humans. They didn't give off any presence at all. So just who's down there?" And of course we do see right here that it's actually Piccolo powering up, and Vegeta is completely shocked by the power of Piccolo on display, which he then goes on to say in his own internal monologue, "That battle power, there's no mistake, it definitely surpassed my own, even as a Super Saiyan. But that can't be, he's just a Namekian." In some other translations it says that his power far surpassed Vegeta's. So we're getting the estimation that Vegeta is in fact weaker than Piccolo, but so too is of course Imperfect Cell, because the fact that Piccolo goes on to fight against Android 17 and is basically even with him, and you could argue he would have been able to defeat 17 with some of his techniques, which I discussed in another video you can see in the top right corner breaking that down. We're also never given any indication that Vegeta actually got stronger after the fight. He took a sensu bean, but then when he went and flew off, he was having another temper tantrum like he often does, and he's talking about that he thought the Super Saiyan was supposed to be invincible and that he was defeated casually and that he should be the strongest in the universe, but then he wonders about whether his biology is inferior to an artificial human. And then in turn, he plans to surpass them. So it doesn't really seem like there's any indication that he ever gets any type of Zenkai boost from fighting the androids, or really that any of the Z fighters get any Zenkai boosts really at all moving forward. The only Zenkai boost we even get in the franchise at this point in time is Cell after his self-destruction when he returns at the end of the arc. So again, there's no indication that Vegeta got stronger despite the fact that he fought against Android 18. However, with that in mind, we still do have the scene right here, which could be a smoking gun for the Vegeta side, in which we see that Cell not only stopped his fleeing because he didn't want to be sensed by Vegeta, but then in turn doesn't even attempt to fight Vegeta here. He doesn't attempt to absorb him. He doesn't even see Vegeta as somebody that he wants to mess with. Instead, he senses the power of Vegeta on display. He says that his power far exceeds what I expected from him, and it would be wise to speed up the process. Typically in this case, if Toriyama wanted to convey to us that a character is weaker than somebody else, or stronger in this case, let's say, that Cell would be saying something along the lines of, well, my power is still greater than his, but perhaps I should increase the gap even further, something like that. But at the end of the day, there is no such statement. Instead, Cell runs in the opposite direction, saying that it would be wise for him to speed up the process of absorbing more people and moving himself toward his perfect form. So it seems like Cell is at a disadvantage here comparing his own power to Vegeta's, whereas Vegeta only really sensed Cell at a distance, and even then, he does say that one of the two has a ridiculous high battle power, but the only one that he actually says is stronger than himself, as you could see right here, is Piccolo. So again, this all seems to indicate that there's a chance that Vegeta in the manga and probably the anime is actually stronger out of the two between him and Cell, if even by a small amount. So with that being said, who would actually win? Well, let's get into the conclusion. So Super Saiyan Vegeta before he goes into the time chamber, or Imperfect Cell? Who would win if the two of them fought each other at this point in time? Well, that's something that's definitely an interesting question to ask, and it also depends on the exact point in time. If Vegeta went to fight Imperfect Cell because the fact that he had sensed his power, say, in Ginger Town, and he battled against him instead of Piccolo, I think that Cell would have a slight advantage here just because the fact that Vegeta would not actually know anything about him. He wouldn't know that he has their different techniques and abilities, he wouldn't know that he can regenerate, most likely, or any of the other aspects that he has, like these certain things that Piccolo is caught off guard, despite being even stronger than Vegeta. So it's definitely worth mentioning or worth thinking about to say that Vegeta could have easily been caught off guard if Cell used the Kamehameha or one of Frieza's techniques or something like that, which in turn would cause Vegeta to, probably end up in the same situation where, let's say hypothetically, he got one of his arms absorbed or, he got seriously injured by Cell. Well, there's a strong chance at that point that Cell would be able to win the fight. However, after Piccolo explains to Vegeta exactly what Cell was and everything that happened between the two of them, I think that Vegeta probably stands a better chance of winning because, as I pointed out, Vegeta not only is seemingly stronger than Cell based upon Cell's reaction and decision to run away rather than even trying to attack him or absorb him. The thing is that Vegeta probably also would have thought of some type of strategy in order to combat this enemy so that he would be able to defeat him. And also the fact of the matter is that Cell does not have infinite energy or stamina like 17 and 18. Even after absorbing them, we never get that impression that Perfect Cell has that, for example. So as a result, the thing is that Vegeta wouldn't have to worry about being worn down like he was against 18. He could just spam like his Big Bang attack or, maybe use the Final Flash if he somehow came up with it before he went to the time chamber. He definitely had the Final Crash that he used against Raccoon, even though Vegeta tends to just use his techniques like one time in the manga and then never again for some reason. But at the end of the day, the fact of the matter is that he stood a chance of overcoming Cell after the battle in that case. So, it is definitely a very close fight, and I even did a poll here on my channel where I asked who would win between the two. It was a very close poll, so you guys can go over here and vote on this poll and a number of other polls I have here, but I could definitely see why some people would pick Cell, some would pick Vegeta, because again, it really depends on the circumstances of when they fight, even if some of the evidence seems to support Vegeta in this case. I mean, after all, he does have Vegeta's technique. But alright guys, let me know your own thoughts down below in the comments. Who do you think would win? Vegeta or Imperfect Cell in his first appearance? Additionally, let me know your own thoughts down below in terms of other videos you'd like to see in the future. Also, if you like this video, make sure to leave a like. Consider subscribing and enabling all notifications so you can stay up to date with all my future videos, and make sure to stick around because there's a lot more to come in the future. Hey guys, it's Mike here, and in this video, I'm going to be discussing a question that I've oftentimes received over the years on my channel. This has to do with the Cell Saga, and more particularly with Goku and Vegeta, two rivals and enemies at this point in the story, and the question of, what if Goku and Vegeta trained together inside of the hyperbolic time chamber leading up to the battle against Cell, instead of having Goku and Gohan enter and Vegeta and Trunks? What kind of results would this have yielded? What changes would this have made to the story and to the characters themselves? So let's start first off with the mentality of those two fighters going into the chamber. Now, Goku actually went, after he woke up from the heart virus, and recruited Vegeta to go into the hyperbolic time chamber with Trunks in order for them to train to fight against not only the androids and Cell. Just like Vegeta interpreted and anticipated Goku would be doing this, so too did Goku know that Vegeta would, and that they wanted to surpass the Super Saiyan wall, and the levels of power that they had encountered at this point in the story. They wanted to go beyond the androids, beyond Cell, because they had been shown their limits, and not just that, but were shown that even after all the training they did in preparation for these machines, for these cyborgs, for these evil creations of Dr. Gero, they still were not enough as they were. So they decided to go into the room of Spirit in Time, the hyperbolic time chamber, where they could spend a year in a single day, which could definitely use a lot of other purposes other than, training and shadow boxing and increasing the amount of basic strength that you have in your biceps and triceps that Harold definitely would love. But of course, it's Dragon Ball, so they never use it for any other reason than that. The fact of the matter is that at this point in time, Vegeta made it clear to Goku as to what was going on here. He said, "Kakarot, why is it that you brought me along to train here? My ultimate objective is you. You do know that, don't you?" So what Vegeta is saying is that he still, at this point, harbors the hatred for Goku in a sense. He still sees him as disrespecting him, his pride, upsetting his balance of being the true Saiyan supremacy in the universe, and he still wants to defeat him. And as he says numerous times throughout this arc, he intended to kill Goku. So the question is, for him, why would Goku even allow him to train in there? And Goku says, well, he understands that, but he knows that he won't be able to beat all of them by himself, and that Vegeta, of course, would also be sensing that. Now, as for why Goku has Trunks go into the chamber with Vegeta, I think a lot of that comes down to two different reasons. Number one is because Vegeta and Trunks are father and son. They're more likely to be able to train together, at least in some sort of capacity, even though we don't really see that happening on screen. A lot of people don't believe that they did, but I feel like there could be some evidence to support it, which maybe I'll get into in its own separate video. But also, I think that Goku knows that having him go in instead of on his own with Trunks would be better for him. And he's kind of trying to help him out by having him connect with his son. So Goku's really doing a good guy thing right there. Additionally, it ties into the other huge component of Goku's plan, which ties into everything with his own son, Gohan, that we could see right next to him. Because after all, Goku goes in with Gohan during this point in the story, and as he talks about, he actually intends for Gohan to not only become a Super Saiyan, just like he was in the future, but also to become more powerful than him. Goku says that he wants to overcome the limitations of his Super Saiyan, become stronger than anyone else, which he does, but also the second part, where he wants Gohan to be even stronger than him, who has already become stronger than anyone else, also happens. Because when Goku and Gohan emerge from the chamber, they are both mastered Super Saiyans, and Gohan is the stronger of the two before he even unleashes and unlocks his hidden potential, which I'll get more into soon. Now, with regard to Vegeta and his power, of course, I just said how Goku and Gohan become the two most powerful in the arc, other than Cell at the time. But we see when Vegeta goes into the time chamber with Torankasu, he ends up becoming way more powerful than Goku, Gohan, everyone else at the time, including Cell, when he achieved the grade 2 of Super Saiyan, on top of increasing his base form of power with the Super Saiyan form as well, to where he's able to stomp Cell in this form. And he continues to beat him down to the point to where Cell, even at his most powerful, stands no real chance against the power of Vegeta, and Vegeta actually goes on to say that it would be kind of pointless for him to even waste the energy to kill Cell at this point in time. Now, another thing that Vegeta points out right here that you could see is that this guy Trunks is almost as strong as me. Of course, Trunks goes on to show off his grade 3 and makes the argument of whether or not he's actually stronger than Vegeta, and maybe Vegeta was just, blind to that situation. However, I discussed that more in depth in another video. You could see that in the top right corner. The fact of the matter is, though, that Vegeta and Trunks were a certain level of strength, and even that was really nothing compared to the power of Goku. Because we see Goku demonstrate just 50% of his power when he goes with Gohan to visit Korin. And just look at the reactions of everyone on display. And this is even more played up in the anime. We have Piccolo sweating and freaking out. We have Vegeta, he's completely speechless. He can't say anything. He's clenching his teeth. He's sweating even more than Piccolo. And, he knows that he doesn't stand a chance even against Goku's 50%, which means that Goku is over twice as strong as Vegeta, because Vegeta and the others don't know that this is Goku's half. They assume probably this is his most powerful level of power, his maximum. But again, this is way more than Trunks and Vegeta at this point in time. And even after Vegeta enters the time chamber, he's still weaker at his 100% than Goku's, which goes to show you just how much of a big increase Goku got training with Gohan in the chamber. So theoretically, the two of them would have been stronger than they had if they had gone into the chamber initially. With that being said, Vegeta, no doubt, would have been stronger than he was when he emerged and fought against Cell, as we could see right here as his Super Vegeta. And in turn, he probably would have been able to defeat Cell just as easily in terms of pure strength, and so too would Goku. All the characters, when they emerged from their first day in the chamber, could beat Cell. Piccolo, Goku, Vegeta, Gohan, and Mirai Torankasu are all incapable of being beaten, aside from with regard to what we see Cell go on to exploit here, which is the fact that he goads Vegeta into letting him absorb Android 18 because he knows that he would be able to overcome Vegeta if that's the case, and Vegeta is thrilled by the challenge of the battle, which is very much echoing what we saw from Goku on Namek with regard to Frieza. So both these characters would definitely be stronger than when they went initially. However, with regard to that, both of them could very likely fall prey to the very same thing that Vegeta does. I know I'm saying very a lot here, guys. Don't take a shot every time I do that. Which is where he allows him to reach his maximum perfect, complete Kanzen Cell, perfect cell power, and lets him go off and absorb Android 18, which Trunks tries to stop. And, obviously, because Trunks isn't necessarily as dumb as his dad, even though he still is dumb enough to hold back his power and even allow this to be a one-on-one fight to begin with. But that's more about respect, which is an underlying theme between the two of them throughout the course of this arc, which obviously would be a little bit different with Goku and Vegeta. Although it is quite likely that because the fact that the two of them would be trained together inside of that time chamber, Vegeta wouldn't really have this desire as much to kill and destroy Goku as he did before. I mean, after all, the two of them likely would not be able to coexist in reality in terms of training together. Vegeta would be stubborn and maybe very much like he was with Trunks, not wanting to really show off his true power against Goku, and maybe vice versa. But the fact of the matter is that Goku and Vegeta would be trapped together in a room essentially for a year. I find it hard to believe that Vegeta would be able to hold out long enough in order to not fight against him, at least in a sparring match. And so over time, it's likely that the two would develop more mutual respect for one another, which Vegeta himself goes on to point out right when Goku is fighting against Perfect Cell, that he is really annoyed about it, but he admired Goku because of the fact that he trained as hard as he could, but could never surpass Kakarot. He's a genius. And fortunately for him, Cell was 2 steps ahead of him. So naturally, if Vegeta, after training for 2 days in the chamber, the second one entirely on his own, of course, which probably held him back even more, was not capable of catching up to Goku, that he saw him as being more impressive, the same thing would likely be the case with the two of them trained inside the room together, because he would see all of that firsthand with Goku. Maybe he would never be able to defeat Goku in a straight up fight when the two of them were together. And even if he did, I assume that might be kind of like a later dynamic in the story where he could have killed Goku when he knocked him out as Majin Vegeta and he didn't. He could have killed him at different points in Dragon Ball Super theoretically, but instead he would grow to respect him more, and he's like, well, I defeated Kakarot, that's enough for me, but I'll let him fight and train and get better because of how much of a genius he is. So either that, or he would see that Goku still beats him, and maybe his pride would be shattered once again, like the other times I talked about in a video in the top right corner, but nonetheless, he would grow to respect his rival and enemy at this time, and it would probably be even more dulled down like we see later in the story. But either way, the two of them likely could and very much would fall victim to the situation where maybe Vegeta would try and let Cell go free, but Goku would try and stop him much like Trunks did. The two of them would fight, and either way, Cell would become perfect. At which point, Cell would obviously be stronger than both of them, especially because the thing I'm going to get into soon, which is a huge factor in regard to everything with regard to this situation. And thus, Cell probably would do the same thing that he did right here with Trunks, where he had Trunks defeated because of his own weakness, which I also will get into momentarily. There's a lot of things to talk about and cover here. And then in turn decide to put on a tournament where he would pit Goku, Trunks, Vegeta, and Gohan all together against him. Now, in terms of that, this is what would lead into the Cell games where things would be a lot different, because the fact of the matter is that every single character here would in fact be weaker than they were leading into this. Now, why do I say that? Well, a lot of this comes down to one simple reason: because of Gohan and the fact that Goku purposely trained with him. And that isn't just because the fact that Gohan was his son and that he wanted to bond with his son for a year or anything like that, or that he just wanted to have the next generation carry on his legacy. No, he actually knows that Gohan will serve as the absolute best strategy for him to win against Cell, and not just that, but also to make Goku stronger in the process. Look what he says right here. He said that he wants to become stronger than anyone, and he wants Gohan to become stronger than him. This isn't that Goku just wants to make sure to hold back in his training to make it so Gohan has a chance to win, as a lot of Goku fans seem to believe. No, instead, he says right here that Gohan will be able to be a very strong training partner. Because at first, maybe he would slightly hold Goku back because he wasn't a Super Saiyan, but after that, he would become a huge factor in terms of Goku's strength, because as I talked about more in depth in a video, which I talked about how Gohan made Goku stronger in the top right corner, the fact of the matter is that Goku actually was constantly fighting against the power of Gohan, which was escalating at a significant rate. And so after Gohan became a Super Saiyan, he was constantly growing at an exponential rate in power and pushing Goku to his limits and beyond at a constant rate during the course they're training inside that time chamber. Goku is even shocked when he sees Gohan just kind of shadow boxing in the air, and he says right here, wow, he's really grown so much in just a short amount of time too. He knows just how significant the power is of Gohan on display. And this is something he points out specifically specifically after he gives up in the fight against Cell, where he says that Gohan is stronger than he can even imagine, and that when he was in the room of spirit and time, he started to awaken a great power within him. And Goku experienced that firsthand because the fact that not only in the anime version did he actually see Gohan become a Super Saiyan 2 just very briefly for an instant before he did when he fought against Cell at the end of a really intense sparring session where Goku actually called the whole thing off because of just how much of a fight Gohan was bringing to him, and they had kind of reached their limits at that point. But we also get little indicators that point this out along the way as well. Like, for example, after Goku goes to his 50% of power in front of Korin, Gohan is surprised because he's saying, well, Dad must be holding back. This can't be 50% of his power. Goku also asks Gohan after the fight against Cell if he ever had any time or trouble keeping up with them during the fight, and he says he didn't think that either of them was going all out, and so he didn't really seem that impressed by their power. But Goku, on the other hand, actually was fighting as hard as he could, and it still wasn't enough. So Gohan significantly pushed Goku to his limits, to where he got as strong as he did because he was fighting with someone who was escalating much faster than Goku and eventually surpassed him before he even taps into his own hidden potential, which is then backed up after Gohan powers up against Cell. In the anime, we see even more people confirming this, but in the manga, it's straight up said by Cell right here that perhaps there was some truth after all in what Goku was saying. So even though Goku and Vegeta would be far more powerful than they were when they initially went in together as Super Saiyans, with Vegeta being a little bit stronger than Goku at the time, the fact of the matter is that when they exited, they wouldn't be on the level of Gohan and Goku after they exited from their first time. Even if Goku and Vegeta went back into the chamber again, it still wouldn't be enough. However, they would still likely have mastered Super Saiyan, at least Goku would, during that first time in the chamber. Because we saw this perfectly contrasted for us with regard to the philosophy and the training of Goku, as well as Vegeta and Trunks, when we saw Trunks going up to fight against Cell in his bulked up grade 3 form, where he wasn't able to do anything to Cell, even land any punches, even though Cell says right here that his strength is greater than that of perfect Cell's. And this is something that we see that Goku is able to figure out as well along the way, where he achieves the exact same forms in his training through the meditation, the other training he was doing, that Trunks and Vegeta did. However, despite that, we see that Goku, before even leaving the chamber, realizes the problems with these forms. With regard to the bulked up grade 3, he realizes that it would make him slower and uses far too much stamina, and so he wouldn't really stand a chance against Cell as his perfect form, even if he was physically stronger. The same thing is too that Goku realizes that even that initial Super Vegeta grade 2 likely also uses up too much stamina, which is why he says that he and Gohan need to master the initial Super Saiyan, the basic form, so to speak, and just stay in it all the time. So this is likely that Goku would have figured out the same thing training with Vegeta, and so the two of them would have exited the chamber as mastered Super Saiyans, but still, nonetheless, neither of them would be as powerful as Goku and Gohan were here, even if they went back into the chamber again, because after this, Goku revealed that going into the chamber again wouldn't really be that beneficial to him, and I also explained that even more in depth in a video you could see in the top right corner, unless I ran out of cards, and then you could see it down below in the description, or just on my channel if I don't remember to put it there. So with all that being said, Goku knew that Gohan was the only one that would be able to ultimately defeat Cell in the end and become the true hero, the victor, when everything was said and done, and thus, as a result, it wouldn't have worked out this way if he and Vegeta trained together. They might have gone with a different strategy. Both of them might have been able to do a little bit better than Vegeta did against Perfect Cell, for example, when he fought him the first time. But nonetheless, they would both be defeated. Cell was still really strong after his first fight against Goku, where he did everything he could to beat him. It still wasn't enough. And so, even if Gohan went with Trunks, he never would have achieved the same levels of power that Goku and Gohan win together either, because the fact of the matter is that Trunks, as I had just showed before, was also obsessed with these forms and basically achieved them on his own inside of the time chamber, maybe with a little bit of guidance from Vegeta, as we could see in that one flashback in Super. And so maybe Gohan would be like a bulky, 3-foot tall version of himself that looked kind of like this, Franco Columbu or something like that. But then he would just be going in the wrong direction, whereas Goku and Vegeta would be going in the right one, and none of them together would be able to stand a chance of defeating Cell and winning in the end. Which means everybody dies and Cell goes on to do whatever he wants, except for, if he runs into Broly or somebody else along the way that will, kill him. Or just straight up erase him if Zeno gets bored. But okay guys, this has been my breakdown of what I believe would happen if Goku and Vegeta train together. In the end, it simply wouldn't be enough for them to overcome Perfect Cell, let alone Super Perfect if he found a way to kind of replicate the same situation. And knowing Goku and Vegeta, they probably would have let Cell become his perfect self, even if that meant that they had to fight each other once again just to be able to unleash that power within Cell, which then would lead to their own demises, because this time, well, it's unlikely that Gohan's power on top of his training with Trunks, if he even did that, would be enough to overcome. But what do you guys think? Let me know your own thoughts down below in the comments. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future. Hey guys, thank you all so much for watching. You guys are awesome. If you're interested, I also broke down the greatest and biggest versus battles in the Buu Saga, which you guys can see in the top right corner and down below in the description. I also have a lot of other content on my channel, so make sure to check that out. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, and you better subscribe.